Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I apologize for being a little bit late today. This is the Patron Appreciation Show. It was supposed to be at 3 p.m. It took a little while for me to accrue some of the items that I wanted to use for the show. Meaning there are several clips, and I chose kind of at the last minute, hopefully this will fail magnificently, a show point from one of my patrons. So this is Patron Appreciation. I'm going to open this up after I give my spiel. And in giving my spiel and opening this up, I'm going to allow call-ins. I stopped doing call-ins, and I got to be honest, I don't know why I stopped doing call-ins. I think it was because the same people were calling in, and not having any experience with shows. I assumed that the goal was for multiple people to call in, not for the same people to call in over and over again. But I find that that's just the norm in shows. So that's probably, let's start doing call-ins again. Now, that said, the show today is going to be on what's called Entryism. Darius Ingalls gave me this particular topic, so thank you, Darius. And he gave me a very long explanation of what this is. And the wild part about this is I have kind of tangential experience with this, or at least an understanding of this, because of a channel that I used to watch on YouTube. So I'll use my own experience, combine it with what I know, and then ask the question. First, let's give a definition of the word. So, entryism. This. Entryism.
Entryism.
I love computer voices. Say it again. Say it again.
Entryism.
Say it again.
Entryism.
All right, there you go. Entryism. The infiltration of a political party by members of another group with the intention of subverting its policies or its objectives. The infiltration of a political party by members of another group with the intention of subverting its policies or objectives. Now, take a look at this woman. This is Hannah Sell. Now, this is my own experience where I came across this. Listen to her. She could be found in many other members of the Socialist Party in the UK. Can be found on this site, Fire and Thunder, to a very small audience. And you would think that they have millions backing them, but it's her and a few other people. Take a listen to her. She's fascinating. I came across her first, and let me explain what happens to members of her group.
You know, look at the reality. The gap between the rich and poor in society today, the top and the bottom, is bigger now than at any time in human history. You all know this statistic, but according to Oxfam, the richest 62 people on the planet own more than the poorest 50% of the world's population. That is a greater inequality than there has ever been. And far from the working class no longer existing, traditionally more middle class sections of society are being driven down to the level of the working class and are being forced to adopt working class methods of struggle. What is it when the junior doctors organise mass picket lines, other than sections who previously would have seen themselves as part of the middle class adopting the working class's methods of struggle? And new technology, and this is the irony, or the ultimate condemnation of modern capitalism. New technology is used not to benefit the whole of humanity, but in order to increase the profits for a few at the top while they drive the rest of us down. And that means not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. Previously more middle-class professions like architecture and lawyers, accountants, increasingly are becoming people who sit at a computer screen, working a program, being paid peanuts, as their jobs are de-skilled. That's previously middle-class professions. Never mind what is happening to those of us in working class professions. The gig economy. What's the gig economy other than using new technology to return to the Victorian era? So instead of standing on the London docks, waiting desperately to see if you can get a day's work as a docker. Now you're sitting in your house, waiting for your smartphone, the app to beep at you, but to do exactly the same thing, to go and get a few hours work which you don't know from day to day whether you will have. Capitalism has always meant the exploitation of the working class. And even in boom time, in the good times, the working class cannot afford to buy back the full product, the things that we make, the full product of our labour, because we're not paid enough. But in periods of growth, capitalism temporarily overcomes that by investment, by driving the economy forward, which in turn creates new factories, new workplaces, and so on. But at a certain stage, all the old contradictions reappear. Capitalism is an inherently unstable system. That is always the case. Riven by contradictions, swinging from boom to slump. But today, levels of investment are at historically low levels. That was the case before the economic crisis and has continued to be the case. And broadly speaking, there'll be much more detailed discussion on the world economy in other sessions. Capitalism is increasingly a system in crisis.
I agree with everything that woman just said. And not just agree with everything that woman just said. You can find her spitting fire on these type of issues. And I think, I think she's right, clearly, that this is the argument that I make for myself. Now, the catch is always, what do you do about it? I mean, it's one thing to define a problem. It's another thing to define a solution to that particular problem. Capitalism is going to continue until it is fully and completely discredited, when the productive energies within the society itself and the means to compensate are essentially expended. Now, the problem, the catch of this is there going to be a planet left? And not just is there going to be a planet left, is there going to be a situation where you're having robots doing the labor, the majority of the public and shit and piss with a small 0.2% living in a bunker somewhere with a swimming pool? That's going into a tangent. I mean, my concern on a lot of this stuff is that as time moves on, the abilities for labor diminish, especially when you get technology that can do the labor. Labor has a much heavier hand in this when it's actually labor doing it. The moment that you get a robot that you can put into a factory and works 24 hours a day, doing 5 or 6 times the work that the human beings were doing, those human beings have lost their job, while simultaneously that robot is making that person at the top extraordinarily rich. The products that the people used to make, they no longer can afford. And if they're lucky, they can get a job at Walmart or McDonald's, or they can get an Uber job, which the point that she was making pays peanuts. You have a large segment of the population. Yes, you can make an argument that says, well, the labor, the unemployment numbers are low, but what exactly are they doing for employment? The number of soup kitchens and all this other stuff has expanded, not just in the UK, but also in the United States. And people are in dire straits. It's not about having a job. It's what kind of job do you have, and whether or not the job actually pays you a decent wage by which you can live off. To some degree, I would say comfortably. I don't know anybody that wants to be vulnerable, even if they can make their ends barely meet. That said, the Socialist Party, that party used to be a part of labor. That party was expunged from labor. The members were expelled. Now, the reason that the members were expelled has to do with they were calling themselves a militant wing, or they were being called a militant wing, and a militant socialist wing that was very interested in this idea of Marx and Lenin and that type of stuff. At least that's the argument that's used against them to explain being expelled from the party. The argument was that they were trying to pass an illegal budget. And in trying to pass that illegal budget, they gave enough pretense for them to be expelled. It wasn't just the members of that was put in the newspapers and everything else. It wasn't just the leadership. The expulsions even went down into the membership themselves, depending on the member. They are no longer part of the Labour Party. Now, they may take actions and whatnot in order to assist somebody like Jeremy Corbyn because, you know, they do like Corbyn and they do want to push for this thing of Corbyn. But from their standpoint, they're not members of the party. If you ask them, they would want to be members of the party. But the argument also kind of made this point that they were trying to change the Labour Party into essentially a socialist party, a full-on socialist party. And this went against what Labour wanted to be. So part of the Entryism thing stemmed for that. Meaning this band of group, this group that was essentially a socialist group, wanted to change the Labour Party into a socialist group by infiltrating Labour. Entryism. Now, they weren't successful with that because they were expelled from the party on those grounds. Now, the same question, to some degree, comes up to the Democratic Party. Take a listen to this. This guy wrote the book called Shattered. An amazing book. Everybody should read that book. Because that book details how it gets to the point where Hillary Clinton tells her team, and it's not my fault that I lost. It has everything to do with Trump and Russia and that goddamn Comey. Not taking any responsibility at all for the fact that she lost the reality shows. And in this part, listen to what he says Bill Clinton reached over and told Tom Perez when Tom Perez got the leadership spot.
The DNC is unpopular with its own base. Half of the Democratic Party, or roughly half the Democratic Party, felt like the DNC was unfairly tipping the scales in the last presidential election, trying to get Hillary Clinton nominated, trying to hurt Bernie Sanders. So you start with that bad blood. And really, there's just been a clash between these two sides that has resumed. The hostilities that had been put aside at the Democratic Convention in 2016 resumed the minute that Donald Trump was elected. This huge battle for the soul of the Democratic Party between the Clinton-type folks and the Sanders folks. And Tom Perez is in the middle of that, and he's gotten very explicit instructions from President Clinton, as we write in the paperback extension of the original book. He's gotten instructions from Bill Clinton not to let the party go to the Bernie Sanders folks.
Did you hear that? Tom Perez was given explicit instructions from the Clinton folk, from Bill Clinton, to not let the party go to in the middle, Trudy. Not let the party go to the Bernie Sanders folks. That's an amazing thing. He just lost an election to a reality show host, and he's already saying, don't let the party go to Sanders. Now, why is Bill Clinton saying this? Right? You can make an argument that says, well, Bill Clinton just doesn't want Sanders to take it. He doesn't want the radical wing of the party, if they want to call it radical, to take it. But to some degree, it goes beyond that. We're back to this thing of Entryism. Let's let the computer say it, because I like it when the computer says it. I like her voice.
Entryism.
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 Entryism. We're back to that. The infiltration of a party by members of another group. Bernie Sanders is not even a Democrat. Now, that said, though, if we're being honest, Bernie Sanders is closer to a Democrat than third-way Democrats. In fact, the fact that they call themselves third-way Democrats gets across that there is a distinction between what the Democratic Party was versus what the party became when third-way Democrats took over. Third-way Democrats themselves was a case of entryism. The New Deal Democrats that was in office, the FDR Democrats, third-way Democrats even has appropriated the language of FDR as it goes about essentially infiltrating and changing what the Democratic Party was to what the Democratic Party is now. Essentially taking massive amounts of cash, believing that they can take that cash and retain whatever some soul or semblance that used to be the Democratic Party itself. I have news for them. Clearly, that is shown to be false. Ultimately, your candidate lost to reality show hosts, and many of the people who voted for that candidate, that reality show host, were Democrats. They were Democrats. Do you realize that the Republican Party, it was assumed that the Republican Party would never win the House of Representatives. That's the domination that the Democratic Party had over the House because that represented essentially, workers and so forth, New Deal policies. The public itself didn't change. The Democratic Party changed. There's a difference in those things. They moved the dial to the right. The public was right, hadn't gone anywhere. They were discredited based on their own policies. It's only so many times you can speak in that feel your pain language in the way Chris Hedges says, while at the same token letting the public down. And the moment that the public became aware that they were being let down and taken for a ride, yes, it took 30 years, 40 years, but they finally woke up. And that hatred, that anger, that fury, that's anger that was pushed and aimed at the establishment, part of that establishment were corporate Democrats because the public believed that they were serving the interests, essentially being bought, that they were working in the interests of workers. So much so, they were willing to go with a billionaire over the status quo Democrat that was in office. Now, what Bill Clinton knows is that Bill Clinton changed the party. And what Bill Clinton wants to prevent is the same thing from happening again. Hence, him taking his rape hand that he touched many women with and putting it on Tom Perez's shoulder. Ugh. Don't let Sanders take the party. Just saying. The catch is, Bernie Sanders is trying to reinstall the party. This, what they call it, insurgent campaign, as they like to call it. I like that term because that some degree gets a difference on who he is versus who they are. Ocasio-Cortez and some of the other Democrats that have taken hold in offices are also trying to do this. Those Democrats that were pushing for Green New Deal, that was pushing for Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, education, those are policies that third-way Democrats would never in a million years touch. But they are pushing this as a tip of the spear with the idea of changing the party. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to reinstall the party. Now the question becomes, are they going to be successful? Look at this. This is Ocasio-Cortez trying to stop Joe Manchin from taking the lead energy spot. Now, as you're aware, Joe Manchin is an oil man from the state of West Virginia, a coal man, and has sold West Virginia down the river, voting with Trump, if I'm not mistaken, 60% of the time. Why are you a Democrat voting with Trump 60% of the time? The fact that West Virginia went for Bernie Sanders in such numbers gets across to you that it's not that they like these right-wing policies. They are screaming for some level of help. Do you realize 25% of the kids in West Virginia are in poverty? Not they're poor. It's the line, that low bar that the United States government gives as an official poverty line. That, I'll give you a heads up, that low bar, there's a lot of space above that bar where people would firmly consider themselves impoverished. 25% hit that poverty line. Joe Manchin giving massive tax cuts. Part of the reason those teachers were striking were because of the tax cuts that Joe Manchin gave when he was governor of West Virginia. He drained the coffers of West Virginia to some degree. It's not that they love right-wing policies. Here's the thing. If you're... The United States has a responsibility to West Virginia. This is a slight detour, but it needs to be said. The United States has a responsibility to West Virginia. I can make an argument that they have a responsibility to all the states, especially states that are producing energy. West Virginia is one of the poorest states in this country, even though they were a major energy producer. That money had to go somewhere, and I guarantee you it went into the hands of a 1% somewhere. Now, the people who are working in West Virginia, particularly within the energy sector, yes, they want to keep their jobs. Even if those jobs are dirty and even if those jobs are cold, if those jobs allow them to feed their family, they want to keep their jobs. Now, that said, for the rest of the country and the rest of the world, we need you to not have that job, which means that you need to give them a lifeline from point A to point B, as you take them away from that particular job in coal, which is something that we don't necessarily want to continue to invest in, and move over into some other clean energy or whatever you're going to allow them the opportunity to grow into. I guess I'm making a point that no, those people are not going to want to lose their jobs if they don't have anything that is comparable to their jobs that will allow them to take care of their family. Yes, they may be more inclined to do that if they had a lifeline going from point A to point B. People, for the most part, want to be self-sufficient and they want to be able to take care of their own. And if you're trying to take that away from them, they're going to fight vigorously, even if it's something like coal. They're not insane for it. They're absolutely right for doing so. It's just for the overarching narrative, you're fucking over the planet. I got needs that I need to meet. I understand, but you're fucking over the planet. Is there a middle ground between those things? Yes. Support them as they move into something else. That's what for fuck's sake. It needs to change. Joe Manchin's let's protect oil at all costs is fucking nonsense. But that's the policy he goes by. Now, Ocasio-Cortez is against Joe Manchin taking an energy sector job. And she has been loud and vocal about it. I have concerns that's why I say that our issues are not just left and right, but that they're top and down. Ocasio said Friday at a press conference held outside the Capitol, I have concerns over the senator's chairmanship just because I do not believe that we should be financing or we should be financed by the industries that we're supposed to be legislating and regulating, touching with our legislation. Okay, I said that poorly. I have concerns over the senator's chairmanship just because I do not believe that we should be financed by the industries that we're supposed to be legislating and regulating and touching with our legislation. Ocasio added that the vast majority of Americans agree that lawmakers should not be taking money from the industries they regulate. That's bribery. That's bribery. Yeah, that's not an uncontroversial opinion if you talk to average people. But let's let her say it. That lawmakers should not be taking money from the industries they regulate. And the fact that they continue to do so contributes to the disconnect between everyday people in Washington. But in D.C., that's a controversial opinion. That's a problem with D.C. then, right? If average American is looking at this and saying, there's a problem with this process. This guy's supposed to be regulating the oil industries, but he's being bought by those same oil industries. What belief, what honest, actual belief do you have that the person who's being bought by the oil industry is going to regulate the oil industry? She's perfectly right. Joe Manchin, however, is still a Democrat. And both of them have a D beside their name. And Joe Manchin is the norm. Joe Manchin is not outside of the norm. What Ocasio-Cortez is saying is absolutely right, that the average person, if you ask them, hey, should the person who's being bought, allowed to do certain legislation, they would probably say no. But in D.C., as she said, that's a controversial opinion. They're at odds. This is not just odds with her and Manchin. This is at odds with the new crop of Democrats, or you can say the bunch that are to the left, with the leading proponents of the party, the Pelosi's, the Steny Hoyers, those people who are setting the policy agenda and who are trying to decapitate any notion of a Green New Deal or, for that matter, even Medicare for all. They are at odds. What Ocasio is trying to do is change the party. Here's another one. This is Sanders. Sanders, at one of his conferences, I think it was a recent conference at the Sanders Institute, he gave the keynote speech opening and starting it off. I'm only going to play a section of this because I want to play the whole thing for the entire audience. But listen to how strident he is and uncompromising he sounds when he's talking about the Green New Deal and making and support for workers and that type of stuff. This comes after a barn burner of a speech by Cornel West introducing Sanders that is a hard act to follow. But let's hear him. They have different styles in getting this stuff across, but I love the way Sanders talks because I listen to him and I say, yes, he's right.
Let me thank, in case some of you didn't notice what you were seeing when you flew in, it's called snow. And I know some of our brothers and sisters from California and Arizona enough.
Reporters asked me, how did we choose the people that spoke and how did
and some of us are fighting for affordable housing, and some of us are trying to stop the destruction of the planet. But at the end of the day, our vision is a world that works for all of the children of this world, not for a handful of billionaires. And I want to thank Jane and David and my whole family for the hard work that they are doing every day on this in this area. My news today is, good news and bad news. The good news, and Cornell just mentioned this, and it tells you what all of you know. I mean, this is a group of people who work in progressive politics every day. And all of you know that change always comes from the bottom, not from the top. And all of you know, and what this institute is exactly about, is to try to educate, go beyond the corporate media, to talk about the real issues facing real people. And just the other day, we had a real example of what could have happened. It turns out that even, Cornell used the word truncated Congress. Man, I'll give you some better words next time. All right? Might be a corporately owned Congress, or might be other things. But even there, it turns out that when you explain what the American people really did not hear much about, that in this terribly poor country of Yemen, very poor country, turns out that in the last 3 years, because of the Saudi-led invasion and intervention in that civil war, 85,000 children have died of starvation. According to the United Nations, millions of people are on the brink of starvation. 10,000 new cases of cholera break out every single week because the Saudi military has bombed the water infrastructure in Yemen, so there is no clean water available. You're looking at the destruction of a very poor country. Nobody in America knew that. But it turns out that when you start talking about that issue, and Cornell is right, everyone's worried about one journalist. What a terrible tragedy that was. But what about the 85,000 children who starved to death? Maybe that's a tragedy as well. So it turned out that when you're able to raise the issue, kind of break through things.
Just to inject something, nobody cared about this during Obama's term. None of the Democrats cared about this during the Obama's term. None at all. Obama was the one that greenlit this war in the first place. This is on his conscience. Now, that said, Donald Trump has been just as obsequious as Obama was, if not more so, to Saudis. But this has been used as a point of attack, which is the only reason why people have been able to see it. It's been able to break through the left because Obama's out of office, Donald Trump is gross, and he's associated himself with MBS so closely that the attacks on Saudi Arabia and MBS, to some degree, cast a certain dark light on Trump. The attacks on Saudi Arabia, the openness for the attacks on Saudi Arabia, are purely a result of Obama being out of office and Donald Trump being close to Saudis. Just saying. He's right that the moment that you start talking about it, and people are like, oh God, I don't want any part of that. I think it was like 80% of the public is against the United States assisting Saudi Arabia in this way. But it's not just what the public is against, it's what the public gets to hear about. And that's dominated by media and the political class. And if the media and the political class are hand in hand on a particular issue, that issue goes by the wayside and they talk about other stuff that doesn't necessarily pertain to anything of significance. In this case, the only reason this broke through is because Khashoggi was killed. It was so gross. And Donald Trump has associated himself with the person who was responsible for Khashoggi's killing. But his point is valid. And he pushed through his legislation before Khashoggi was killed, meaning he had put this bill up before Khashoggi was killed. So go start Sanders on that one. Let's keep going.
that we were able just yesterday to win a significant vote. And I think in the Senate on Tuesday or Wednesday, we're going to win that resolution that says the United States has got to end its relationship with the Saudi despotic regime there and get out of Yemen. But it raises a profound question. And that is, how the hell do we ever get into a relationship with a government like that? And once again, everybody says, oh my God, they killed Jamarl Khashoggi. It was a terrible, brutal. The guy walks into a consulate, a safe haven. They kill him and they cut him up. How horrible is that? But that is just one example of what that regime is about. Our longtime ally, where if a woman is going to get a job in Saudi Arabia, she has to get the permission of some male, to allow her to get the job or to go to school. All right. We got a handful of corrupt billionaires who run that country. If anyone stands up and protests, they get jailed. So maybe as a nation, we should be rethinking our relationships with governments like Saudi Arabia. And that we have a president who thinks, and of course he lied on this issue as well, thinks selling them $100 billion of arms makes it all very well and good. Of course, he didn't even get the $100 billion. That was a lie as well. What we are here to discuss is the fact that we are living in very, very difficult times, and you guys are struggling with all of these issues. And I know that during this conference, there's going to be some serious discussion about issues like economic justice. And economic justice means that maybe, just maybe, we will be able to begin a discussion in this country on a word that is never seen on television, not read in the newspapers too often. It's called poverty. Got 40 million people, including more than a few in this beautiful state, who are struggling every single day to keep their heads above water. In this state and all over this country, people are working at 2 or 3 jobs. And everybody in this room knows that while unemployment today is relatively low, that does not mean that tens of millions of families do not continue to struggle. And that is why, because of the work that people in this room have done, and others, of course, who are not here, people like Fight for 15, the very good news is that issues that we talked about, Nina will remember this, and Cornell will remember this, and Jane will remember this, all of us who were on the campaign trail together, the ideas that we raised, where every day the editorial pages would say these are extreme, these are radical, the American people don't want it. It turns out that that is exactly what the American people wanted.
Yes. Yes. I fucking yes. I love that. 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 And he's right. Like, that's what the Democratic Party used to be. That is not, however, what they are now. And the question becomes, will they be able to re-ensoul the party? If there is public support when Sanders is making this case, there will be pressure on the party itself to conform or to potentially get primary. They've already said that everybody needs to be primaried, and you're probably going to have another crop of people primarying the other Democrats in the very next election cycle. But whether they're going to be successful is a different question. And I got to be honest, I don't have an answer to that question. It's happened in the past. I mean, FDR to some degree was a change in the Democratic Party status quo. That change lasted for 60, 70 years. The New Deal or third way Democrats was, again, a change in the status quo. and that has lasted for the past 40 years, but that's falling apart at the seams. You wouldn't have a person like Sanders if what they were pushing and what they were selling was something that people wanted to buy. The question becomes, are they going to be able to maintain their position? Or will people and groups like Sanders be able to infiltrate the party itself and to reinsole the party, kind of like Angel being fucking soul in the back of the party? That is hard to know, but God, I sure hope so. God, I sure hope so. Let me bring other people in on this. Let's see. What? Oh wow, we have a crowd. All right, so I'm going to allow call-ins. Fuck, I don't remember the number. To hear other people's opinion on this. There have been some successes, but let's be honest, there's been a multitude of failures. But this is something that's just been starting out for 2 years. I have no expectation of something happening overnight from the standpoint of change. In my mind, it's a siege war. It's something where you repeated attacks on the Democratic Party over and over and over, persistently, trying to get some level of change and not supporting anybody that doesn't represent your interests. It needs to be a complete and clear red line on this front. Here's a catch, here's a caveat. If you're going to play in party politics, you're going to have to play in party politics. Meaning Ocasio-Cortez, being a Democrat, is going to toe the Democratic line, which to some degree means supporting Nancy Pelosi. That sucks, but that's where we at. Hello, what's your name and what's the opinion? Will they be successful re-ensoling the Democratic Party? Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Barely.
So what's your name and what do you think? Turn down your computer or your cell phone and listen to me through the audio. So what do you think? Do you think these guys are going to be successful trying to re-ensole the party, or do you think this is all for naught and they're essentially pissing in the wind?
I think there's going to be some success. I'm getting an echo.
Hold on, let me turn down my volume. That might be me. All right, go for it.
I think they'll have some success. I'm sure, the establishment is going to be against them.
Wait. First, what's your name? I'd like to know who I'm talking to.
Trudy.
Oh, Trudy. Okay, what's happening, Trudy?
Same old thing. Hoping that Bernie can make a difference. Because I don't have any confidence anybody else will.
Well, the thing is, I don't think he can do it by himself, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean, but I guess the question becomes how... while I don't think he can do it by himself, I do think that opening your mouth and bringing up the topic slides the window of debate. And sliding the window of debate allows for an opportunity to change other people's opinion and bring people to your cause. So I do believe it in that sense.
Exactly. Look how he's changed the conversation of the country already.
That I do agree with. I completely agree with that.
And as for him being a Democrat, I want to point out that outside of our bubble, most people will still vote straight party ticket.
Yes.
And Bernie has to run as a D, and if he does and wins, he'll be the head of the party, and he'll have a chance to make some real changes from his bully pulpit.
Now, I think your point here is somewhat of a subtweet against third parties. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, say it again?
It sounds like you're making a side slap at third parties in that statement. Essentially saying, look, if Sanders has to run, Sanders is going to run as a Democrat. So, the people who are against him running as a Democrat need to kick rocks. That's what your point is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very slim hope. I'll admit that. But I think it's really the only hope.
So you're against him running as a third party person?
Absolutely.
I believe it or not.
Because look at how many people supported Jill Stein and how many of her votes actually got counted. She didn't even get the 5% that we needed. I voted for Jill. You know that.
Yeah, me too. The 5% that she needed in order to get the thing. I agree with you on this. The public itself is kind of in this mindset where it is either red or blue. And there's a, this kind of esoteric other where if a person is running as a third party ticket, unless that person is a massive name, it is hard to get those votes. I always make this case about William Wallace, where William Wallace was one of the most popular politicians in this country. And when he ran, I think he got like 10% of the vote, despite being extremely well known, despite everybody knowing who he is.
And there's no other name. Oh, I'm getting that echo.
You said there's no other name?
Compared to Bernie.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anybody else? So say for the moment that Sanders doesn't run. Then what? I guess
it looks like
I think we're putting.
Tulsi might run.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying Tulsi might run if Bernie doesn't.
She has been talking about running. Tulsi has some skeletons in her closet, but I like her foreign policy chops. I'm not quite sure what she would do locally. I like the fact that she's...
I don't know either, but I know she's my second choice.
Yeah,
based on,
yeah. You know, so far, what I know of her, she's my second choice too.
She's brave and strong.
Yeah, I like her. I mean, they've been attacking Tulsi unceasingly for taking that trip to Syria, which I thought that was the best thing on the planet. Like, part of the reason why I like her so much is because she was willing to take that trip, and she was willing to go on the news and bring up the fact that, we're essentially supporting terrorists. That is a mind-blowing thing. That is a mind-blowing thing. So, thank you.
I don't want to hug you, Jamarl. I'm going to get off.
Oh, thank you, Trudy. I appreciate you calling in. Thank you for your support.
All right. For everything.
No, I haven't done it. I haven't done squat. I just do a channel. Nina Turner is my second choice. Rosen 710. I like Nina Turner myself. Second choice, yeah, I can see that. I mean, I would vote for Nina. I'm not against voting for Nina. So fair enough. I'm putting the number in at the bottom. What's your name and what's the topic? Or let me ask this way. What's your name and do you believe that Sanders will be successful re-ensoling the party, or this is just pissing in the wind?
No, this is John, and no, it's not going to be successful.
Explain. Go for it. Explain your reasoning. Like, what's the... Because I think I don't know if I agree or disagree. I guess I'm in this weird quasi state of unknowingness. I don't know. I don't have a clear... I don't have a clear point of view of no, even though I trend towards the side of I don't necessarily think he's going to be successful in this climate. By the same token, there's historical precedent to show that possibly. But there are a lot of people that failed. What's your explanation for the reason you don't think he's going to be successful?
I think watching that video and just, you're talking about the climate. You're talking about people and what their perspective is and what's their conscience and what are they paying attention to. I mean, when you look at I always look at the lowest common denominator when you're looking at, whether things will change or not. Are they even aware of what's the issues? And when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, I know it's anecdotal, but most of the groups and most of the, conversations I have are just parroting the mainstream media. Like there was an article that what's his name, Cory Booker was come in and he was going to he's gearing up for a run in 2020.
He's not going to win.
And I saw I use like Facebook like as a gauge. I really think people on Facebook are. I'm not trying to be like well, fuck it, I don't care. Well, sorry.
You're with family, so speak your piece. You're fine.
I look at people on Facebook as like they really are not aware of what's going on. Like the things they post, they're They're not intellectual, honestly.
I give you this. Conversations I have sometimes with, I don't have many friends. I do a show all the time, so I'm like a hamster wheel. But when I did, and I would engage in political conversations, I would be horrified with some of the stuff they would say.
Exactly.
And
so you understand what, you know, was the like they were sharing that article. I think it was like a CNN article or whatever. And you know, it's just, to me, it's just, you know, the normal fillers out there, like, oh, this person might run, and they're trying to see the reaction. People were actually sharing that, and they were actually arguing like, oh, they won't elect Cory Booker because he's too radical and he's too, you know.
Cory Booker is too radical? Is that what they're saying?
That's what they're saying. Literally, that's a literal quote from somebody. And you know, I commented like, you know, if y'all think Cory Booker is a good candidate or he's too radical or whatever, you really don't understand what's going on politically. And you know, people came at me like, oh, you don't know. Like, my point is, people really don't understand the issues. They really don't understand what's going on with the fight between the Democratic Party and the quote unquote progressives. To me, or honestly, I think we had this discussion before.
Yeah.
I really don't see the progressive, like the quote unquote progressive wing, that progressive. I think they're just moderate.
I agree with you on that part, right? So some of them anyway. I agree with you on that many people that you engage, their perspective of the world is essentially set by what corporate media tells them the world is. I think that's fair. You know, whether that's somebody sitting at home watching CNN or Fox News, ultimately they agree with varying shades to the left or to the right. The wild part about it, though, is if the working class is under stress, do you think that stress will bring about a raising of consciousness, especially if people are engaging the fact that you're not in stress because, you know, some immigrant or something like that. This is between the billionaire class, or you could say that top 1% class, or even the 0.1%, whatever, and a political class that is essentially obsequious to that. That argument, when that argument is made on a national stage, does that argument make inroads? Because I think that's what we're talking about. I mean, there's no Bernie Sanders if the public is doing, you know, fucking well. So, you know, a New Deal, FDR can save capitalism. You can have growth and all this other stuff, and essentially, you know, for 20, 30, 40 years, everything looks great. Everybody's moving up at the same pace, and then it hits a wall. If that argument is made, just like that argument was made in 2016, that doesn't gain inroads. Because you would agree with me that the argument in the conversation that we're having today is a byproduct of the 2016 election. Is that fair?
To a point. I'm getting a little feedback, like there's an echo, but simply, like I said, my whole point is, okay, you might make some inroads, you might make, you know, you might get a few more. You might even get Bernie in there, honestly, because of just circumstances, if he runs or whatever. My thing is, you're still not changing the scope. You're talking about it like, well, he changed the scope of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but it's not systemic change. I mean, it doesn't necessarily change the system itself that has allowed that party to be what that party is.
Exactly. I'm not hopeful at all. I really, like, people are making it like still have hope and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I understand why.
I think honestly, they're looking for hope.
No, honestly, like, and I know that people don't like it to take it here to the extremes, whatever, or they feel this extreme. But honestly, if you look back, you talk about the historical course. Most change doesn't come just through, you know, doesn't come just non-violently.
Yeah.
Just honestly, and that's just reality. And honestly, that's where I think the course is where, like, people finally realize what's going on. I think it's going to be too late, and I don't think it's going to be nonviolent, honestly, because the state of what people are paying attention to, what they're aware of, what they're politically aware of, and the reason why they keep going in the loop is because they're not even aware. Like, people are not aware of your show. People are not aware of, you know, a lot of people are not even aware of TYT, and they're like, come on, like, they're just, all right, whatever. But there's the political awareness of the average American is
Low.
is elementary.
Yeah.
It's elementary. Like, and I don't think that's going to change at any time. I don't like, and the media that they seek out just reinforces the narratives that are keeping them in a situation they are in.
Yeah.
Like you'll have people arguing for the system that's screwing up.
Yeah, that always blows my mind too. Ojeda said something about that, saying, kind of made this point that, it's sad that people will vote for somebody who's going to screw them over. The bomber, the guy who was, and I'll end it on this one because I've tried to keep the calls below 10 minutes because my wife always bitches about it. She's like, "Oh my God, you were talking to that guy for an hour." I've done that, by the way. I've had a conversation for an hour. Ojeda. So the guy, who was it? The bomber. The guy who was sending off the pipe bombs to all of the people who were against Donald Trump. That guy. The guy ends up being an uber Trump supporter. Now, that guy was living in his mom's house. People say his mom's basement. I don't know if he was living in his mom's basement, but he was living with his mom because he had lost his house. And he called in a bomb threat to the electricity department because they were going to turn off his lights. Now, the person who ended up taking his house and foreclosing on his house was the person that Trump put in, I think, in the Treasury Department that was responsible for the foreclosure of his house. Now, this guy literally is supporting somebody who essentially was supporting somebody who got rid of his house, took his house from him. That's an amazing thing. Like, he's literally living in his mom's basement, terrified, insecure that they're going to cut the lights off. And he's supporting people who, in some part, was responsible for the taking of that house. That's amazing. Like, that's a bombshell. Like, that in and of itself should have been a bombshell. People supporting things that are against their interests. And they do it all the time.
I mean, I'm not trying to take up all your time, but honestly, it's like when Bernie is fighting for the $15 minimum wage, and people are like, people actually argue like that's too much money.
Yeah, I know, right?
And it's like $15 an hour is 40 hours a week. It's like $30,000 a year.
It's nothing. It's nothing at all.
Nothing.
I'm always amazed that people argue against their self-interest. Like, they would make the argument of the capitalists. They would say, exactly. Well, if that person gets that, then I only get X. Maybe you should be getting more also. Like, instead of arguing from that position of I want to make sure that everybody is secure, regardless of their economics, they argue the opposite. Well, I work in this desk job, and if that guy at doing fries make $15 an hour, I only make $16 an hour. He's only doing fries. Like, I find those arguments to be amazing, as opposed to taking the contrary perspective of the person who's running this company is doing magnificently well, and yes, I want that guy to get $15 an hour, and as that pushes up the economic scale, I also want to make more because I deserve to make more. That seems to be a better argument, as opposed to, I'm going to hit the guy at the bottom. I agree with you, man.
But that's the issue. But, you have the whole, environment issue, and that's never going to get addressed. Like I said, I'm just going to close it here. I just don't feel like that Bernie's going to do anything. Honestly, he's not going to change that party. There'd be more chance if you ran third party and would just strictly, hit the online market as far as like news.
Yeah.
And really, organize people around that. And a real, instead of saying $15 an hour, say fucking $30 an hour. Really, if you're going to be radical, you really want a political revolution, go all out, go balls out. Don't give me little trinkets here or play the little moral, we got to do. No, because honestly, you got to dismantle the whole system.
I don't think Sanders wants to be radical, though. That's what I mean. The arguments. Well, the arguments that Sanders and these guys are making is we want policies that the public agrees with. That's what they're just trying to budge or move the system in a different direction. I don't think they're trying to be radicals per se. Media calls them radicals. I don't think $15 an hour was radical at all.
It's nothing. It's nothing. And like I said, the problem is this system is so. the people just believe in the system so much, and they don't understand the issues, and they don't understand like you had Guy McPherson on and everything like that. I don't necessarily 100% believe everything he says, but I can see what he's saying to be believable, or that could happen.
You can see the trend. I mean, like I don't.
Exactly.
I'm not in this camp of everything is done or completely fucked and all this other stuff from a.
But I can see it
from a technical standpoint. But I can damn sure see it. Like
I definitely can see it.
Yeah, the signs are there.
People don't have that urgency. They don't even understand that's going on. They don't even they're not even aware of that issue at all, or even that conclusion, or that's a possibility. They just there's whatever the media says. Well, they're saying in 2100 that's going to be an issue. It's not going to be an issue now. So let's put that off to the side. I'm still not getting paid, but this person is trying to get $15 an hour. And I only make this much, and they're only doing Friday. So no, I'm not for that. And that's the rationale, and that's why nothing will change. Sorry, this hold up your time. See people are still calling. I'm gonna get off now.
No,
whatever.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you for calling, man.
All right, thanks, man.
What's your name, and do you think that Sanders is going to reinstate the Democratic Party? Yay or nay?
Am I on the line?
Say that one more time. We'll repeat that.
This is Luca. I can't tell if I got through or not.
Oh, Luca, what's going on, man?
Okay, a couple things.
Go for it.
Firstly, I just wanted to talk about this bill of Sanders to get the U.S. out of Yemen.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the details of this bill? Have you already talked about it? I may have missed you talking about it already.
No, I haven't talked about the details of the bill, but go for it. Explain.
It has a really terrible, fatal loophole that will make it completely ineffectual. It allows for the troops to remain on the ground in Yemen, provided that they are involved in combat operations against Al-Qaeda. Okay, well, do you know the official reason why U.S. troops are in Yemen to begin with?
I do not. What's the official reason? I would imagine something to do with Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, August 4th, 2017, there was an article in the Washington Post. U.S. troops are on the ground in Yemen for offensive against Al-Qaeda militants.
Well, that rationale has been the entire reasoning for the global war on terror. I mean, there's no bill, per se, allowing us to be in Syria and Somalia and all these other countries. They've been using this fig leaf of, we're fighting terrorists in all of these other countries. So I'm not necessarily shocked by that particular one. Yeah, that's a loophole. That's a loophole. There's one other loophole in that bill with pulling our assistance from Saudi Arabia in this case. Saudi Arabia already has the planes that is used in those in-air fuelings. So, like, even in that one, it's one of those things of, yeah, we can talk about it now, that it's too late because Saudi Arabia already has the capabilities that they were using the United States for. Saudi Arabia even comes out and says themselves, we don't need the United States in this capacity anymore because Donald Trump gave them the same airplanes in one of the things. So that's fair. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
So my question is just, what is the point of that bill?
I suspect that
it doesn't stop us from selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. It doesn't actually stop U.S. troops from operating in Saudi Arabia. All they'd have to do at any time is say, we're pursuing an intelligence lead against Al-Qaeda. And, yeah. I mean, it's just
it becomes worthless.
Just to make it look like something's being done. It seems really, I hate being overly cynical, but I just don't see any benefit to it.
That's fair. That's a fair point, Luca. I mean, I guess you could make an argument the optics matter. And in this case, I guess my thing is the argument of terrorists has been used completely. I mean, like the entire war on, quote unquote terror, this amorphous thing, has used this argument of Al-Qaeda. And come to find out, to add to that point, I guess bolstering your point on this, there was a report leaked the other day by accident showing that we were doing combat operations in Yemen, even though they kept saying that, this only was in-air fueling. So that's a fair point, Luca. Yeah, I think your point in this is they're chest thumping on this particular bill when this bill has a fatal flaw in the bill, as opposed to saying we're going to get rid of all support for Saudi Arabia, whether it's these weapons deals or whether it's pulling all support back in Yemen. The loophole allows for, hey, there's Al-Qaeda there, we need to go and get Al-Qaeda. Is that fair?
Yeah, I just, that's all I wanted to say. I'm not going to be on the line any longer. To me, Sanders knows everything I just said. So I have to ask, what is this about? Because if he wanted to do an effectual bill that would actually stop, you would structure the bill differently so as to actually prevent the types of interactions that this bill will just allow. I mean, it just seems like a giant. I don't even know what to say. Like, I'm very disappointed. I read the bill and I just thought this is a farce.
It's pointless.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a downer, but I wish I could be more enthusiastic about Sanders infiltrating the Democratic Party. But if that's the kind of strategy that's going to be used, it's just like, I can't get excited about it.
I feel you. I guess I don't think I'm excited about it per se. I guess I look at it as a sea change in what's operating or typical operating procedure. And from the standpoint of entryism, this new faction that was an old faction trying to change those things. And I take your point. Ultimately, they're chest thumping about this bill when there's a fatal flaw in this bill. Essentially, the same rationale that's being used now for us to be in Yemen is the same rationale that can be used to continue to be in Yemen. So fair enough, Luca. Fair enough.
Yeah, so we passed the bill, and then it's mission accomplished. We stopped the U.S. involvement in the war in Yemen, and everybody can go home, except we didn't do it at all.
Yeah,
so anyways, that's my... See you later. Thanks for taking the call, man.
Thank you for calling in on this. I appreciate this. I'm going to look this up and, I guess, give a detailed show on this particular point. That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, it's like, what's the point of the bill if the bill is going to still allow you to do what you've been doing before with the same rationale? Let me hold one call. Let me do this one. So, honest questions. Despite the effort being put in by Bernie and Ocasio, we have to ask a lot of questions as taking over the party is vague. What is victory? What is defeat? What deadline for determining each? Are Pelosi's promises just Schumer scams? I love that. I love that. And that's a fair point. That's a completely fair point. Give me 1 second. That's a fair point. What does it even mean to take over a party? Like, what does it look like? Now, you could say from the standpoint of Bill Clinton that, what we have now versus what there used to be over the arc of time, you can see a difference in the party structure. But what does it look like from the standpoint of the left? You could say regaining the party. What's your name, and what do you believe that they're taking over the party, yay or nay?
Hi. So my name is Sebastian.
What's happening, Sebastian? Baltazar. What's happening, Baltazar?
Not too much. I just wanted to throw out a couple of sort of big questions that I think have to be asked and answered in order to really address this topic. You kind of have to ask yourself, well, what does taking over the party mean? If you are essentially trying to act like moving upon two spaces forward instead of one space, is like, if that is your definition of, yes, we made the more aggressive move, however, we're still not taking any pieces. Are you taking a piece, or are you actually putting people in check? Are you forcing bad decisions?
Let me ask you this. What would it look like to you? Like, from the standpoint of a win, or the standpoint... My reservations for this has always been, if this is happening, meaning if they're right, if I'm wrong, if my original disposition is, I don't believe you're boarding the ship, if I'm wrong on that premise, what does boarding the ship looks like? Like, what does it mean to actually get some level of victory? Is too strong because there's always a perpetual conflict in a sense. But what would you look at and say, okay, fair enough, they're moving the ball forward?
For me, sort of the baseline level would be, at bare minimum,
actual positions of power. Not that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to get Joe Manchin off of being the head of the Energy Council, but actually having a progressive as the head of the Energy Council.
That's the pushing upon thing. That's like the incrementalism type thing. Power. Yeah.
Right. Like, it's one of those things where if you don't really have the ability to basically say it's our ball and we're going home, if you're not going to play with us, you really have no leverage. Like, our Pelosi promises just Schumer scams. Like, you're going to get crap deals every single time if you're trying to work with them. And the question is the Democratic Party really worth taking over? Have you effectively boarded the Titanic and it's still sinking? I mean, you can bail water into the wall all you want. It's still going to sink.
Yeah.
Should you be looking for lifeboats? Should you be questioning that? And I guess the last sort of big question they still have is, even if Bernie is given the nomination by the Democrats, what kind of strings does that come with? Like, you're going to be stuck with a situation where Tom Perez and various Democratic high-ups are going to either squelch some levels of his speech because he's not going to be able to push for things that make all the Democrats look awful.
So wait. So yeah. I've watched Sanders sit beside Tom Perez on Chris Hayes, and he pulled no punches. Tom Perez looked horrendous in that conversation, and Chris Hayes even kind of noted, Tom, it seems like Sanders is pointing to a bad guy, the billionaire class. Do you see a bad guy in this? And Tom Perez backed away from that conversation completely. Bernie Sanders was there, ashen face, like, oh God, he just, it's
right. But at the end of the day, he still has to work. He doesn't necessarily have to work with Tom Perez at the end of the day.
Well, Tom Perez is probably not going to be head of the Democratic Party at that point.
And Chuck Schumer.
That's
because effectively Tom Perez he's not Tom Perez's sort of, I guess, he's not lower on the totem pole than Tom Perez, but he still has to somehow work with Chuck Schumer, or at least he thinks he does. I think he doesn't even need to do any of that. I think the more that he turns on Democrats and the harsher he is, the bigger his support grows.
I agree.
And especially with the non-voting group, the independents, the more he basically says the Democrats have failed you, the Republicans have also failed you. You need someone who actually cares about you and represents you.
Agreed.
And that's ultimately why I'm like, I don't know how, like, Kyle's sort of proud dad, Justice Democrats are doing work. And I'm like, but what is your victory condition? What is your, what's a success? What's a failure? Do you have a timeline? I'm all for taking over the party, but will it be just so we can elect a new Speaker of the House of Atlantis? There's only a certain amount of time before we're absolutely fucked. And the question is, what is that cutoff time? And I feel like that's something that really went unaddressed in Jimmy and Kyle's talk, and that really needs to be addressed, because there has to be, I don't have forever to go to college. I don't have forever to get a degree. I don't have forever to work. It's real-time deadlines of, if you haven't gotten a degree in 10 years, are you still getting a degree? And was it in the original thing that you were going to get a degree in? And if you're not asking those questions, you have to, wonder what failure is for you.
That's a good point.
Are you actually making any kind of an impact? But that's all I got. So
that's a damn good point, Baltazar. I love that. I love that point. God, I love that point. I love that point, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yep.
Thank you for calling.
I'll leave you to the next caller, but thanks so much. Yeah. Take care.
Okay. Hello, what's your name, and do you think that the Bernie wing or the Sanders is taking over the party? Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Jamarl, am I finally speaking to you?
You are finally speaking to me.
Awesome. I just want to...
Wait. What's your name? What's your name? I'd like to know who I'm talking to.
I go by... Just call me Ohm.
Ohm? Okay, Ohm.
All right.
Go for it.
I would just like to add, if anybody has suggested to the Dem Remainers, the Dementors, whether or not they've ever considered the fact that a third party would actually help their efforts in reforming the Democratic Party?
I have. I've suggested that. Because it's this Malcolm X, Martin Luther King argument to me. Whereas Malcolm X made Martin Luther King a hell of a lot more palatable as opposed to Martin Luther King by himself. If Martin Luther King doesn't have anybody who's pushing against Martin Luther King that's far more radical, then Martin Luther King can be somewhat ignored. If you have somebody like Malcolm X who's, saying, I want my rights right now, or I want to leave this country, and they're talking about, violence in order to secure those rights, Martin Luther King looks a hell of a lot more palatable and a better way to go forward. Same thing with South Africa. You had certain leaders who were a little bit more strident. Nelson Mandela of that group was more of a peacenik. I remember being in Kenya and having a conversation with a guy, and I had never heard this perspective before, but the perspective makes sense. He's like, he didn't like Mandela. Not just didn't like Mandela, he thought Mandela was this kind of, this giveaway. This kind of, okay, we'll allow him because he's, nonviolent and he's been broken in prison, that type of stuff. As opposed to the people who were more strident to, regain the land that was stolen, that was taken. So I agree with you. In the same vein, the Dem enter versus the Dem exit, the fact that you have a lot of people that have left gives you more leeway and more leverage to push your way in regards to policy. I agree. I've made that point before.
Now, are you familiar with the history of the FDR Democratic Party in the 30s? Like the reason why they shifted so far to the right, so far to the left, was because there was a very well organized, growing,
socialist, communist,
communist party to their left.
Yeah, socialists and communists and unionists. Yeah, you had a lot of people to the left of the Democratic Party, and he thought that the party could go under.
Like, I'm hard-pressed to think of any situation, either in United States history or global history, where a faction within a major party was able to push it to the left in the absence of an independent left party outside of that main party.
And here's another thing to add to that. My argument has always been support the people who represent your interests and the people who don't let them fail. Have that as a red line that is bright and clear, kind of like, like a NATO treaty of sorts, where if one country is attacked, all countries are attacked. Sacrosanct. There is no deliberation on this. The fact that it happens, everybody goes. And for that to be clear and known, meaning either you toe this line or you lose. And for that to be clear and unequivocal. The reason I say that, and this goes to the Dem exit argument, I don't see how you get change if people are propping up the thing that has has garnered such hatred from the society itself. It's like, it's like you're propping up this thing. How do you get the thing to change if you're propping up the thing that you want to change? Like, it seems like nonsense to me.
I mean, the brand of the Democratic Party is so tainted and so bad that even if you were like full-on progressive, like even if you somehow completely reformed the Democratic Party into a progressive party, but you kept the name, people are probably going to be turned away from just that name and just that history.
Yeah. So I know for me, when I was in the elections, it was back home, I voted for a libertarian candidate for the first time in my life. Before I voted for the Green Party, but there wasn't a Green Party candidate that was running for my district. And there's a headwind trying to support a Democrat. The other person that was running for the Democratic Party was a CIA operative, and even that was her claim to fame that she was part of the CIA. That this somehow made her this kind of awesome person, worthy of being elected into politics. I agree with you on this. I completely agree with you on this. And I've made this argument on more than one occasion that Dem exit is the thing. When 15 million people left the Democratic Party, that was when the Democratic Party decided to have a unity reform commission. Yes, they might say because of Bernie Sanders, but it wasn't because of Bernie Sanders in in a vacuum. It was because 15 million people had left the party, and they needed to put on a dog and pony show to try to, get those people back. It's like, here's our stuffed animal, come back to the party. I don't know if that's necessarily worked or not, but that's what they were doing. But the reason why they were doing it, to back up your point, was because all those people left. They wouldn't have done that if those people hadn't left the party. You're right.
Right.
I think you're right. Yeah, man. I completely think you're right on this. So, yeah, I think either you need a third party or at the very least people pull themselves out of the party. This was one of those things that Ralph Nader even made this kind of argument. If millions of people left saying, I'm done, either you change or you die.
Do you think that the Green Party is hurting the prospects of a new or a strong third party right now because of just their terrible political performance?
The problem with the Green Party is that their name, in some part, the Green Party, like they're tree huggers. It comes across as tree huggers, even though it's not true. I mean, they have a full platform. But
it's not only that, but like people point to Green Party. Like if you talk to the Sam Cedar types, like the Remainer types, they will often bring up the Green Party as an example of a third party that failed, that hasn't achieved any sort of political success.
But that's not really true. I mean, they have achieved political success. I mean, granted, it's sporadic. It's in California.
Yeah, very sporadic and very small. And
yeah.
It's like,
but it's not major. I agree with you that it's not major. The Green Party has a few problems. I mean, some of it has to go with the way the funding mechanism. Like, if you are against taking money, great, you're not bought. But how do you fund your campaigns? How do you even get in office? I remember a conversation with the Green Party. It was a conference. It was a left forum. And the conference had to do with putting their finances in order. Now, I thought this was going to be fascinating, and I thought I was going to hear the platforms coming up for the Green Party and everything else. It was an hour conversation where one Green Party member was angry that he didn't have anywhere to have a convention, meaning he had to rent somebody else's space in order to have a convention because they didn't have enough funding for them to have their own. And none of them coming to a conclusion on how do we fund our operations. Because it's one thing to say we're not taking corporate cash. Okay, how are you going to fund your operations? Because if you want to have a convention, if you want to have a location where you can, plan activities and all this other stuff, that requires a certain degree of cash. And they were
perhaps thinking about it in terms of cash is you've already lost the game. You've already sold your soul to the devil if you're thinking about trying to accumulate cash, because you're never going to be able to accumulate more cash than the parties that represent the bourgeoisie. They're always going to be able to outfund and outspend you.
That's true.
The only thing that you have in your advantage is that your policies should be the policies that are in the class interest of the 99%. So you should be able to call on far more volunteer labor time than the bourgeoisie could ever call on. Like, they would have to pay for each one of their man hours that they spend on their campaign, whereas you should be able to call on a huge wealth of volunteer work.
That's something that's more of an intellectual thing that doesn't necessarily play out in reality, right? I mean, you've had.
Well, I would point to the example of the Black Panther Party during the there was a time period when J. Edgar Hoover said the most dangerous thing in the United States was the free breakfast program that the Black Panthers were organizing for their communities.
So it was communist. Because J. Edgar Hoover thought that Martin Luther King, the Black Panthers, that all these were like communist sympathizers.
Well, the Black Panthers were actually communists. I think they were very sympathetic to Maoism.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying, but that didn't play out. Like, in reality, the Green Party, even though it has the same policies as Sanders for the most part, or similar anyway, wasn't able to garner the support or the vote, even though the policies themselves would have been better in line with working people.
Because like a lot of people, like, they would say, oh, I like the Green Party policies, but there's just no way they can win. So the problem with any third party is that it's going to have to show itself to be a serious, disciplined, and organized political entity so that it can win over the people's trust and confidence.
It needs legitimacy. Like, it has to be considered a legitimate party, meaning of 3 of these people or 4 of these people who are running, all three of these have a potential for winning. And in having a potential for winning, it is okay for me to vote for this person because I'm not wasting my
vote. And thus you see the problem with the Green Party, because they've ran so many times, and every single time they've ran, they've netted tiny amounts of the popular vote.
Yeah.
They might be more effective on a local level, but then maybe
they do local politics. I mean, that's what I mean. The Green Party does do local politics, and they've been successful in some areas in local politics. And across the world, the Green Party is a real party, especially if you're talking about Germany or in the UK and all this other stuff. It's just in the United States.
The people that you need to convince in the United States aren't going to be familiar with the Green Party. Like, I wasn't even familiar about the Green Party overseas until very recently.
Yeah.
So, like, people in the United States that you're trying to win over to support your party are going to be looking like at what your party is doing either locally or whenever it has any sort of national publicity in the national elections.
You know, there's a speech by Chris Hedges after the election. And Chris Hedges, I think it's a Green Party gathering. And Chris Hedges gives this blistering speech. And it comes across as a condemnation of the Green Party. Like, he's making the point, like, whatever you guys are doing is not working. We need a new strategy. You know, you only got like 2% of the vote. This ain't cutting it. Like, he was scathing, but he was right. He was right.
Yeah.
It's like you're running every year and you're only getting 2% of the vote. But here's the thing. This is what I would say, and I'll end it on this. The goal of the third party is not necessarily always the win. The goal of the third party, to kind of make your point, is to get across that you can make the other person lose. It's the loss. It's the potential for loss. That is the thing, that is the power of the third party. The idea being that for the major party to win, it has to appropriate ideas from the third party. Now, the problem is they're going to water down those ideas because they don't fully believe in those ideas. But the point of it is to be able to enough of a threat that you can siphon enough votes to make them lose where they have to pull those things.
I think that the corporatist Democrats would rather that their Democratic Party would rather that they lose than to adopt progressive policy.
I think that
so
too.
The reason why I advocate a third party outside of the Democrats is essentially as a way to coordinate our collective effort to like instead of having the progressives wage all these disparate struggles, to unify our struggles into a concentrated blow at whatever opportunistic weak spot reveals itself over the course of political action, not so much as a way to threaten the Democrats with loss should they not move to the left, because they would rather lose to the Republicans than move to the left.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, I can agree with that. I can agree with that to some degree. I can agree with that.
The left party should be uniting all our efforts. It should act as like a central command in a way, if we were to use military analogies here.
No, I agree. That part I agree with. But not every Democrat wants to lose. Like, because you're still talking about an individual that's running, and whether the party may say, okay, we would rather fail in a particular capacity, but the individual, I guarantee you, more likely than not, wants to win that race. But I feel you on this. I felt that way myself, that they would rather lose as opposed to appropriate ideas. Medicare for all.
I think especially on the national level, maybe on the local level, you will find people that are, that are probably progressives, but are only they're only taking up corporatist policies just to win, so that they can at least maybe try to change the party from the inside.
Yeah.
But especially on the national level, like the central committee or the ruling body of the Democrats, those people are those people are through and through corporatists.
Yeah, they're bought. They're extremely bought. I mean, ultimately they get elected based on the funding that they get paid, and in the funding that they get paid, they do the favors of the people who give them the cash. That makes all the sense in the world. It's the most logical thing in the world. You have dollars or pitchforks. If there are no pitchforks and the only person is giving you dollars, then you go in the direction of the dollars, especially since 90% of those races are won by the side with the most cash. I agree with you on this. I even agree with you on the central command thing. that there needs to be a spot where lefties have an organizing principle, and all of those efforts, be it environmentalism, be it Black Lives Matter, be it, you know, whatever the gamut, this kind of grab bag of lefties and the things that they care about is in the same bag. You know what I mean? Like ultimately these groups are fundamentally the same in the things that they push for and the things that they want, even though they may be working in different areas. It would be nice if all of them were under one umbrella. I agree with you on that too.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, precisely.
I agree with you. Dude, thank you for this call, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, let's see. There's one more, and this is Wesley Walker. Oh, thank you, Wesley, and back at you. How long should JT stay on the air normally? Oh, God. Well, this one is a patron appreciation, so I usually think about it from the standpoint of an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2, depending on what's taking place. But thank you, Trudy. Thank you. And shout out, Wesley. Shout out. I can do this, by the way. I practice doing that. Tune in tomorrow to the Progressive Soapbox with special guest Dave Rubin. Jamal will talk for an hour of Rubin nonsense. If Dave Rubin is nodding and saying good point, then I am fundamentally fucking up in what I'm saying. There should not be a huge amount of agreement between Dave Rubin and I. All right. Last caller. What's your name and do you believe that Sanders is taking over the party or all of this is a pipe dream?
Steve, and it's a pipe dream.
All right. Explain why, Steve.
So, okay. It's a pipe dream because there's still money in politics. There's still a donor class that controls who gets elected by and large.
Yes.
I think that unless you can decouple not just the money from politics, but the people who are putting the money in politics from politics, you're not going to see any kind of reform from within inside of the party.
So should the war be waged on money in politics? Should that be the tip of the spear? Because if this was, look, if I look at this stuff as chess, in fact, I look at everything as some degree of chess.
Right.
At some point, you need a tip of the spear. Like, you need some weak spot where everybody at the exact same time screams at the height of their lungs and makes that a single defining overt issue. Medicare for all seems to be the thing that's been taking place. I mean, 70% of the population, even majority of Republicans are on board for it now.
Yeah.
But is corruption the thing? Like, is this idea of your politicians are bought, both Democratic and Republican Party, they're bought. And you need something fundamentally different from the standpoint of getting anything real done. Is that the argument that needs to be made?
I 100% think that ending the duopoly as it stands should be the thing that provides the format for a progressive coalition. I'm hearing myself and it's really freaking me out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, let me lower the volume. All right, go for it.
All good. I think that you can use ending the duopoly, getting money out of politics, exposing the corruption as sort of a unifying message. If you're going to say it's because it's broken or it's because it's corrupt or it's because of the fucking money, then yes, absolutely, that should be the thing that provides for a coalition movement that involves labor.
Because look, I think that cuts across Republican and Democrat. Like, people who tend to vote Republican and people who tend to vote Democrat and people who are independents, I think a large section of them look. Let me say it this way. You have some people who will always vote Democrat, doesn't matter, who will always vote Republican. Take them to the side for the moment. The people who fluctuate between the two parties and independents. I think that argument makes sense to them, especially people who hate and are angry at the political class and the political system, making an argument of, look, these people are bought. And we need to change the fact that these people are bought in order to get anything done. I guess my point is, if your argument is right, that nothing changes, it doesn't matter. if Sanders wins. It doesn't matter if other lefties win. Ultimately, the system itself is still run by corporate cash. That system itself fundamentally needs to be changed for any real progress to take place in the nation, meaning that the first step is corporations are not people too, and we would not have money involved in our politics.
Well, and I think the first step should involve us withholding our labor. I think without a national general strike, there's not going to be enough motivation for the people that are in power to go, oh, fuck. Well, if they're out in the street and they're not producing my capital, I've got two choices. I can murder them en masse, or I can find a way to weasel out of this. And I don't. You're right, Republicans could get on board. Republicans run for office on the premise that government doesn't work, and if you elect me, I will prove it to you in real time. Republican voters are so used to the fact that government doesn't work that's a talking point they can get behind.
The wild part. I have one of my nurses back in the States. His name is Brian. Brian is a Republican. He trends more towards the libertarian side of the Republican, hates the Republican Party at this point to the same degree that I hate the Democratic Party. And him and I would get into these amazing conversations where we would have amazing agreement. Like, it's mind-blowing. Like, during the time that I first started going to that particular facility, I think it was like years ago, I was in the camp of just voting Democrat. And then I woke up. And the stuff, after seeing Brian again, I think it was years had passed, he had this shocked look on his face like, what the fuck happened to you in an intervening time period? Because we were having amazing levels of agreement. And the thing that he said stuck with me because I think he's right. He said, there's nobody looking out for Brian. Nobody in the political class cares for Brian, so why should I give a shit about what's taking place in the political class? I don't believe that the Republicans are looking out for me. I just believe that, the Democratic Party lies and say that they're on my side while screwing me. The Republican Party just screws me. Between the two, they'll cut my taxes. So, that was his calculus. When I started making this argument to him, like, yeah, but what if the $20 trillion in debt came along with healthcare, improving infrastructure? I mean, your infrastructure is falling apart. Paid class so your kids could go to school without. He says, okay, maybe I think differently. That's amazing. Yeah. Like, it's hard to get across. When I met Brian, he was spitting fury at Obama over some nonsense. And to get him to that point where he said before, he says, after talking to you and my other friend, I started to move to the left. I couldn't see it. But this was that first brimming moment where, oh my God, I broke through. I broke through. That's why I don't abandon, I don't think the Trump supporters are the godless, at least not all of them. Some of them, maybe, but I don't think all of them are. I think some of them are just angry at the political system and the way the political system is, and they want something different.
I think that part of the problem is that the media narrative is so ingrained that people genuinely think that when we're talking about we need a different form of government, we need a different style of government, we need a government that does this, they think that we mean with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer running it.
Yeah.
And they've got this idea that Nancy, we're capitalists, and that's that Pelosi is a wild-eyed fucking communist. and that's because that's what the narrative says.
Well, Obama gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. They kept calling the guy a communist. I mean, for fuck's sake. What kind of communist gives 95% of the wealth to the top 1%? That is an amazing number. Like, I every time I see that number, and I'm like, that number is unreal. And then you hear Obama himself say it, and you're like, oh my God. Like, how do you do that? How... Like that's...
Well, so what you do is you get rid of the fairness doctrine and then you consolidate the media into 6 corporate companies who then partner with the government to write the Patriot Act and the healthcare legislation, and then you legalize propaganda, and then you get people believing all that stuff.
Yeah. And you give them a ton of money. Jon Stewart, there's an awesome conversation between Jon Stewart and I think it was Marco Rubio. And Jon Stewart made the point to him, there are multiple ways to solve a problem. Instead of giving all of this money to the banks, you could have also just paid off the loans of the homeowners. That's an option. That's not an option that even came up from the standpoint of conversation, but that solves the problem. I mean, ultimately, it allows the homeowners to get off the hook because you've paid their bills off, but you've also, in doing so, has paid back the banks, meaning the banks get the money that the banks wanted while at the simultaneously helping the homeowners. They didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And the wild part about it is they didn't want to do it because they would say, well, that's a negative hazard. It creates a moral hazard. As if bailing out the banks doesn't create a moral hazard.
Right.
It's like, fuck's
because
sake.
Homeless people, by design, isn't a moral hazard. That's the logic that, wow. Yeah. No, I vaguely remember. You know what? I blocked out a lot of my watching The Daily Show just from my general resentment for the network after the fact. It's not Jon Stewart's fault. It's not. No animosity towards
I like Jon Stewart. During my political awakening, there's certain people who I binge watch. Sam Cedar was one. Tom Hartman was one. Keith Olbermann was one. Jon Stewart, however, was another. Like, his wit and his ability to eat people alive is amazing. Like some of the cutting shit that he would say is fascinating. And many of those people have at this point let me down tremendously. Keith Olbermann's going out and saying, he thought Bush was bad, but then, there's Trump and he wants to apologize to Bush. He was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? I don't know if anybody has binge watched Keith Olbermann, but his attacks on Lou Dobbs and Bill O'Reilly are some of the funniest things on the internet, I swear to God. And his attacks on George Bush were legendary. He would get into these 10-minute long monologues at the end of the show, attacking George Bush in this kind of overhyped, overdramatic way. That was fascinating to watch.
I remember well. I was writing on the Daily Kos at the time, and he would workshop his rants.
Yeah.
On the Daily Kos for a little bit.
Oh, no way! I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, this is 2006, 2007, 2008. But yeah, it's all it was part of his process was workshopping his rant.
Wow.
What the fuck? I was going to say, while I have you on, do you believe, Jamarl Thomas, as I believe, that Kyle Kulinski is Tom Hartman's Padawan?
Kyle Kulinski, do I believe that he's Tom Hartman's who? Say that again?
Padawan. His Padawan.
Oh, his Padawan. He is, oh God. I don't think Kyle is Tom Hartman's Padawan. Tom Hartman, look, if you had a different world, meaning if you had a different world that was far, far to the left, Tom Hartman would be perfectly okay. The problem with Tom Hartman is Tom Hartman considers himself a Democrat, which means that Tom Hartman's ideals and values come in conflict with the party that he's aligned himself with. And so he looks crazy sometimes when he's on his show and he's trying to defend Hillary Clinton while also having this, these extraordinarily intellectual conversation about historical precedent and everything else. If you listen to his conversations on history, phenomenal. He's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Now, Cal is completely different than Tom on this, though, because Cal, I don't necessarily know if has the historical insight that Tom has, if that makes sense.
Right, but he does have an organization called Justice Democrat.
He does have an organization called Justice Democrats. And yes, he does believe in the political process, probably more than I believe in the political process. But does that make him his Padawan?
And he wants to make his own lightsaber. You know he does. You know he does.
I don't.
Okay, you don't have to. You should come back on Slow News Day at some point to continue this conversation. We don't have to do that now.
Just let me know when you want me on. I'm leaving here I'm leaving here on Sunday. I'm going to be in Warsaw after I leave here, and I'm going to be in Warsaw for a week. After Warsaw, I got to be honest. We're going to be in Berlin. Berlin is expensive from the standpoint of treatments, so we're not going to be in Berlin long, and I'm going to do some risky shit in Berlin in order to be in Berlin. So, but I don't know what happens after that. What I would hope for is to stay in Berlin for 2 weeks, but that creates other problems in the trip for later on because my wife wants to go to Prague, and Prague doesn't have any facilities. There's a lot of fuckery that's taking place in the next few weeks. But just let me know when you're free, and I don't mind coming back on. I enjoyed our talk last time.
All right.
Yeah, I had a fucking awesome conversation. I think it went for like 2 hours.
Yeah, we did. We went for a really long time. It was great. I still have hopes to rescue that episode.
You say, what's wrong with the episode?
It's stuck on my stepson's laptop in an Audacity file that can't be moved out of it. And there's no way for me to get that file or my Podbean software onto that laptop. So
was that your first interview?
Pardon?
Was that the first interview for Slow News Day?
No, it was not. It was the third or fourth.
Oh, dude, you're fooling around with me. That's fucked up. But I'm joking. When I
wanted you on first. We had scheduling conflicts, and we still had to put a show out.
You know, the first show that I did, very first interview that I did was with Glenn Ford, Black Agenda Report.
Okay.
I was excited like nobody's business for that interview, and I was like, yes, I'm getting fucking Glenn Ford. Like, you know, Glenn Ford is a goddamn troubadour. Man, it's fucking amazing. And
yeah,
we have an interview. The interview goes extremely well. And at the end of that interview, no video. And the audio is massively fucked up. Like, you can't even hear it. And, you know, it's like, what do? Can you ask Glenn Ford to come back on the show after you've magnificently fucked up the first interview?
Right.
I saw Glenn Ford at one of the forums, and I don't know if he even, knew who I was. At some point, I'm going to get up the nerve to ask him to come back on the show. But no, dude, I don't mind coming back on the show at all. I'm sympathetic to audio fuck-ups. That's my point of saying it. I'm sympathetic to audio fuck-ups.
Word. I appreciate it. Well, man, I'm going to go ahead and ring off. I have to go to my second job.
All right, man. Be safe.
All right,
thank you for calling in, man.
Oh, wait, what?
No, I said thank you for calling in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. That was awesome. I appreciate this. I totally appreciate these episodes. So I'm going to end this here. Let's see. Martian Villager, America KKK has been consistently siding with oppressive forces since they stole land from natives. They abandoned the left after the draft ended in 1960. Yes, it was an Ebu. At that point, they switched to identity politics with, these New Deal ideas. Let's see. CBS, Chiron, George H.W. Bush, and Patriot. I nearly spit tape. Yeah. Trump is actually better for the white working class because he cuts taxes for them. Democrats wants to raise taxes to pay for welfare. Therein lies the material basis for the modern split in U.S. politics. Yeah, but the problem is that the Republican Party wants to cut taxes for their donors. The small tax cut that the people themselves get $1.50 apparently is dwarfed by the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in tax cuts that the rich get. The Democratic Party, or at the very least the left of the Democratic Party, yes, may want to raise their taxes, but they're lowering the expenses to which they operate on. Meaning, you've lowered your taxes, but now your bill has still gone up higher because you're paying more for healthcare and more for these services that these services, if they were provided to you, would make your life materially easier. Like, if you want to say that there's a fundamental split between New Dealers versus Republican Party, fair enough. The argument of lowering taxes is It is one of those things of, yes, we like this, but who are you lowering taxes for? Who are you lowering it for? And in lowering those taxes, what are you losing in that process? And if you're losing in that process because the healthcare has gone up, because your expenses for education has gone up, then have you really gained in the lowering of your taxes? It's not just a straightforward, how much money am I paying in taxes? It's also, what am I getting in return for the fact that my taxes have been raised? There's a difference in those things. There are plenty of people who are in the working class, yes, lots of them non-white, who didn't vote for Trump. Is that just because they weren't woke like the white working class voters? I don't think the white working class voters are woke. Otherwise, I don't think they would have voted for Trump. PV told Jamarl stop wearing the fedora. No, it's just cold here, Luca. It's just cold here. But it's like 4 degrees Celsius here. It's been snowing, not every day. I thought it was going to be worse, to be honest. But I don't know what Warsaw is going to look like. So PV didn't put his pimp hand on me on that one. It's like, I'm wearing the fedora. It's like, don't hit me! Don't hit me! It's like the politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party, terrified that they're going to be hit. Marsha Villager, whites only supported Jamarl Thomas. Why do progressives not advocate for progressive tax plan? Why not advocate for complete tax cuts for the 99% and to make the 1% pay all taxes? Why make these abstract economic arguments? Because you don't have a class consciousness that can bear that. Just being honest. Like you would have people right now that would argue against their own interests. And they would do so by voting for people who push for things that are against their interests. And they still vote for these people. The honest argument is that there are a lot of people who vote for things because of racial issues. I've looked at the polling results. There were many of Republicans that sided with Trump on this because of issues of race. I think issues of economics make these things worse. The thing is, from the standpoint of lefties, if you talk about the left, it's all sorts of people on the left. You have socialists, you have people who are, in the Venus Project camp. But the people who you have into the electoral politics, they would never say that because they don't think that would fly. They think that the American public would be against something like that. The American public do want you to raise the taxes of the rich. That is true. Whether or not they say eliminate all taxes for the people at the bottom and let the top 1% pay the taxes, I am perfectly in favor for that. That's perfectly okay to me. But the catch is, how do you get that pass? And not just how do you get that pass, how do you get anybody to... This country has a history of supporting things that are against its interests. It's not as simple as giving an awesome plan. Racial issues have a material basis. Some of them do. Some. They are ultimately class divisions at their heart. These racists voted for Obama. Some. No, some. Like, some of the racial divisions, you can make an argument that the founding of this country, when it, you wiped out the Native Americans, whites used to work side by side with blacks in the fields. I mean, the moment that you created the racial distinction where one person was a slave and the other person wasn't, you created somewhat of a division in society. Nobody, I've come across nobody that likes to give up a material advantage, even if that material advantage is esoteric. Meaning this thing of, I am white, you're black, and within the society itself, there's a distinction between us where I am of a higher scale. That's the reason why you had the civil rights movement. And even to this day, there's some people that want to go back to the glory days and hate the fact that there's been movements from the standpoint of Hispanics and African Americans in that esoteric scale of ticking up a particular notch. Those people exist. Now, that's not the entirety of the people who voted for Trump, and I've never made that argument that that was the entirety. But there is a faction that you have to accept that that's where they are. And you're not going to change their mind on this stuff for the economic reasons. It's part and parcel to the reason why the Republican Party goes that way. The reason why they're pushing this religious argument or they're pushing these kind of dog whistle for racial stuff is because their policies suck. They're doing this because they're trying to get the factions that can be pulled in these type of issues to try to get a voting coalition. Everything that I've just said is true. Everything that I've just said right there is true. Now, it's a secondary question from the standpoint of, all right, well, you don't really need all of the people. You just need a percentage of the people that are independents and a percentage of the people that individually voted for Obama at one point and then became disillusioned. And the question is, what are the policies that pull those people back? Now, your argument of the 1% pays everything, we're on the same side on this. I agree with you on this. I don't see any particular issue with this. The only issue I see with this is how do you get it across the finish line? That's all. I don't know how you get that across the finish line. B. Green, corporations pay 60% of federal taxes in the 60s and 70s. Not many corporations don't pay any. Yes, that's true. The burden almost entirely been pushed onto workers. That is true. That is absolutely true. At one point, the amount of revenue that the government used to pull in from corporations was much, much higher, dramatically so, than what it pulls in now. Companies like Amazon pays no taxes. And if I'm not mistaken, even Apple, like you have these massive billion-dollar corporations that pays nothing in taxes. He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Lincoln said, you can make the poor rich by making the rich poor. Someone needs to try. I love that. You can't make the poor rich by making the rich poor. The goal is not to make the poor rich. The goal is to increase the living standards of the human population, across the board. That's the goal. How do we tick up the existence of the ordinary person, the least of us in our society? How do we tick that up to a decent living scale? That's the goal. Being rich should never be the point. In fact, I would make the argument that the goal should be to eliminate the capitalist class altogether. The culture of the religious South needs people who despise education and are taught through authoritarianism. Learning through reason and critical breaks the hypnotism. Yes and no. Yes and no. So I went to the left forum, and in the left forum, I was horrified by a talk by a professor. I think he was a professor. Psychologist, sociologist. But he was into behavioral sciences. And the lecture that he gave drew the ire of the guy who was pushing for the Venus Project. Meaning the guy who was pushing for the Venus Project had a rude awakening when this guy stood up and said, look, when we've studied brains and we did research, and the research across the board shows that there are some people that are born in particular ways that are enamored with the right. Meaning, your Uncle Joey at the table, it wasn't necessarily purely a case of nurture. It was also a case of his birth. Meaning his brain was structured in somewhat of a different way than the guy who's more sympathetic and is more akin to be on the left. Now, I don't necessarily know how much, if this can be influenced through behavior, and I would imagine that the environment will make this either better or worse, meaning it will make them either more empathetic or less empathetic, depending on how they were raised. But he made this a strong argument that based on, he was given data and lab results. He was given experimentation. Like his entire time was essentially chock full of studies that kind of bear out his point. Now, the guy from the Venus Project looks at this and is horrified by this because the Venus Project is purely materialistic. And in their mind, it's all behavior. Jack Fresco is wrong on that point. And I even done videos saying Jack Fresco was wrong on that point. There is an aspect of nature to this. His point in one of his videos, in one of his lectures, he said, well, I can't do anything with genetics, so I'm going to go with this idea of environment creates behavior. I think he's right in the majority of that yes, environment does create behavior to some degree, but let's not completely ignore this idea of nature. Because that has to be dealt with if anybody's trying to move into the Venus Project type world. I guess my point is the argument of where was it? The critical thinking thing. It goes beyond just critical thinking. But I do agree with you on that. The education process at the school needs to teach civics. And that needs to be something that goes all the way up to high school, and not in a bullshit way, but in a real way of getting people invested in the government. The education system should be radically changed. From the way we structure ourselves now. I agree with you on this. I do agree with you on this. let's see. Eliminate the fetish of riches. Yes, agreed. Agreed. Right here. Amp, call in. Call in. I want you to call in. You're disagreeing with me. I like it to some degree when people disagree with me, especially when it's a substantive disagreement. You have my number. Fuck's sake. The thing wasn't operating. Hello, what's your name and what's the Amp?
Omen Amp.
Hello, Omen Amp. I'm sorry, Omen Amp. All right, so make your basic argument, because I'm intrigued by this, because some of this I agree with you on, so it's not a complete disagreement. But I think we're going to bump heads on part of it, and so this should be good.
So what progressives need to explain is what they need to explain the phenomenon known as the Reagan Democrats. Why did the white working class, the blue-collar working class, who used to be solidly blue, solidly supporters of the Democrats, and even if you go back all the way to the 30s, they were the backbone of not only FDR's Democratic Party, but also the backbone of the IWW, the Wobblies, the anarchist labor unions, the Communist Party of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. Very left-wing. Why did they suddenly shift rightwards during the 70s and the 80s?
Oh, you're asking me? The civil rights legislation. From my understanding, the civil rights legislation lost the South.
They were also pushing the civil rights legislation during the 30s. Like the actions of the Communist Party in the South, I think they were one of the first ones to be pushing for integration stuff, anti-discriminatory stuff.
But pushing is a little bit different than actually passing it, right? I mean, they were passing Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. I mean, these were things that were hated in a racist country.
The thing that happened was that the Communist Party, by the 50s, was already completely demolished.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Smith Acts, the McCarthyism was just basically the final nail in the coffin. But way before there was McCarthyism, the communists were essentially destroyed.
Yeah.
And once the communists were gone, the left essentially fractured away from fighting for class struggle into basically splitting into all sorts of various, disparate identity struggles, niche struggles, like struggles for tiny little groups of the working class.
I've heard the argument
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
In this scenario, without a unifying class struggle that united the entirety of the working class, regardless of race, gender, against the bourgeoisie, you basically had one section of the working class being pitted against another section of the working class. Meanwhile, the fracture in the working class only benefited the ruling class.
Yes.
So think about it. The working class overall, their standard of living doesn't need to improve, but all that needs to happen is that a particular section of the working class relative to another gains or falls in position.
Yes.
So before civil rights, whites occupied the best positions, the highest paying, the most skilled, whereas blacks occupied the least skilled, the most dangerous, the shittiest jobs, right?
Yeah.
With the advent of the civil rights movement, that basically opened up the floodgates of competition between all workers, regardless of the race, for all positions, essentially.
Yes.
So now,
go for it.
As a whole, black workers saw an increase in their living standards, whereas white workers saw a decrease. So that's one material basis. One point of a material explanation for why the white working class became so reactionary in the 70s and the 80s.
Well, this is the conflict argument, like for immigration, where they would say we're fighting for, they're going to take our jobs. That's always the argument.
Yes.
That's the line that you would often hear Republicans say, oh, they're going to take our jobs. They're coming into the country to take our jobs. This lack of need or lack of access to the things that you need is a potent motivator to piss people off. I can agree with that. I think I can agree with that.
It's like no matter whichever way you cut it, the immigration thing is it might only hurt their wages by like a tiny amount, but the very fact that it even hurts them at all and they can do something about it is why you see such fervent anti-immigration natalist sentiment among certain sections of the working class.
Well, it's not just that. An aging white population, when in some of the experiments that I was reading through, the aging white working population was going into a minority majority government or minority majority country, and they were terrified by this. Like, I don't know if this is, a Fox News thing or what, but there was a certain terror associated with the idea that they were no longer going to be, like 70% of the country or 70% of the voting base, which also incurred a certain reaction. Now, your argument would be, well, this boils down to class struggle, and if the classes were...
I would say that it boils down to, if in the absence of a united working class struggle, that it's a broad left struggle that unites the entire working class against the ruling class, you'll have the working class invariably fracture amongst itself and have each section fight against one another. So, like, the Democrats, of course, both Republicans and Democrats ultimately serve the interests of the ruling class, but they do it by slightly different ways. The Republicans, they fuck over the middle class, like high-paying sections of the working class, less in order to fuck over the poorer sections more, and the Democrats are doing the same thing except vice versa.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats also they speak in a certain language, as if they're there to help you and this type of stuff. We're there to help. I remember Joe Manchin, who voted with Donald Trump like 60% of the time. He was having a conversation with Cenk Uygur, and he says Democrats, they go straight to the heart. And it's like, what? It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean Democrats go straight to the heart? You're a bought corporate hack. It's like you're out there fighting for the oil industry against the interests of the people in your particular state. You're talking about going straight to the heart. They talk in a particular language that is somewhat seedy and magnificently dishonest.
Well,
I can agree with this.
It's like look at Obamacare, right? The Democrats pushed it. They sold it. It was really just a gigantic subsidy for the insurance companies. But they sold it as like, oh, look, it helped a bunch of these really, really poor people. But of course, it helped them really at the expense of better off sections of the working class. And that's the fundamental political divide between the two parties.
Yes.
The gains that Republicans win for the white working class, basically the better off sections of the working class, but because of America's racialized history, slavery and all that, the better off sections tend to be majority white, right? The Republicans help the better off sections of the working class and the middle class by extracting those gains out of the pockets or the welfare that goes to the poor sections, whereas the Democrats help the poor sections of the working class, the more oppressed sections, by extracting those gains out of the pockets of the better off sections. Whereas a truly progressive, like a class-conscious movement, should be saying any gain for one section of the working class cannot come out of the pocket of some other section of the working class. It must come only out of the pocket of the ruling class.
It creates a contradiction at that point. You're creating a conflict between the sections of the working class at the point where you let one to be advantage over the other. That makes sense. I guess the only thing that I would point at, the Republican Party is not helping the white working class. I don't have this, like, the white working class is getting fucked over every bit as much as any African American, or for that matter, Hispanic, or anybody else in the country. Like, I completely disagree with that. Like, so the majority of the people in the country are white. Fair enough. I think blacks make up 13%. I think Hispanics make up like 13%. The majority of the people on welfare are white. And even if you are going to this thing of people who are working, 95% of the jobs created under Obama were low wage. We only make up 13% of the population. If you're creating 95% of the jobs and those are low wage, a large section of that are white. and they were working class. I guess I'm making a point that the tax cuts.
A large section of the people on welfare are white, and a large section of people on poor-paying jobs are white. But that's only because whites are a majority of the population. I think it would be better to look at like the white population as a whole. How much of them are in good-paying jobs? How much of them are in the middle class? How much of them are in the in bad-paying jobs? And how many of them are on welfare? And you compare that with like the black working class, and you can see this skewed bias here.
No. I don't doubt the skewed bias. The skewed bias is there. I mean, the amount of wealth that African Americans have, I think, was like little to nothing in comparison to whites, especially after the financial crash. Blacks kept most of their wealth in their houses. It's not the skewed bias that I'm getting at. I'm getting at just raw numbers in regards to real people.
Right.
Like the majority of the country can't pay a $400 bill or $500 bill. Right. Like, again, we only make up 13% of the population. So it's like, yes, there's a large section of us that are, who may be in further levels of debt. But I don't think Bernie Sanders wins in West Virginia, the numbers that he gets in West Virginia, if that white population, which is the overwhelming majority of the population being white, wasn't in dire straits. 25% of the population in West Virginia were in poverty. Kids. I agree with you. I agree with your basic argument. So don't misunderstand.
Yeah, sure. If there's definitely going to be a class difference. Like, I think the poor whites are probably going to support the Democrats, and the richer whites are going to support the Republicans. And probably like the poor blacks will support the Democrats, whereas the richer blacks support the Republicans. The latter category being why you have the phenomenon of like an African American Republican.
Yeah, but that's so far and few between. Like, blacks make up like 95% vote Republican or something, some insane number.
Well, right. The reason why there are so few black Republicans is because compared to whites, there aren't nearly as many blacks in the middle class or like in very high-paying jobs.
It's not just that. Socialists and communists, they tend to make arguments that are purely based on class. But I'm telling you, it goes beyond class. Like, class divisions might have started at one point, meaning these things were purely issues of class in the beginning. They morphed into something else the moment that you created a disparity between one race and another race on the grounds of identity. There is a difference there. Like, in regards to the way... It's like, so let's go to your basic premise. This idea that if one side is somehow disadvantaged based on something that you're doing for the other side, then you're going to create a contradiction in your operations. And under your argument, no part of the working class should be adversely affected based on the results of something that you're doing for the other part of the working class. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Now, the problem with this is that
you should be working for the benefit of the entire working class. That's what creates solidarity.
Yes, but the problem with that is, from the standpoint of identity...
Otherwise, you'll be like the parent that favors one child over another.
That's true. I agree with that. But the problem with that is, there's another contradiction in this, in the sense that a distinction has been created in American society where you had whites who was given a sort of social status that went beyond just their economic means. Meaning that white person could be as poor as a slave and still consider himself better. Materially, physically better, because the society has said that he is somehow better because of his white skin.
Right.
That's
the ideology that allowed the slave system to remain in place.
Yes, and that's been instantiated into the public consciousness. I mean, when you go into Jim Crow, even the Civil Rights Movement, when all those people jumped into the Republican Party, all of these things are boiling down to a differential between one group based on identity versus a differential in another group based on identity that go beyond material issues. Meaning the very act of allowing an African American or somebody else in the working class to benefit creates or lowers the disparity between those two things, which there's going to be a side of the population that's going to be against because they are, at least from their perspective, worse. Does that make sense? The very act of the social status in and of itself.
It wasn't just. They actually did. They actually did suffer materially. It wasn't just in their heads. Like, for instance, life expectancy of working class males, white working class males,
it's gone down.
I think they've been dropping for over the past couple of years, which is unheard of in any developed world.
But I guess what the point I'm making to you is, I agree with your basic premise, but I think the basic premise, look, and I was in this camp also where I was like, this is all, this is just material needs. This is all issues of economics. You get the economics right, the other stuff fixes itself. And then I started looking at the studies. And it's, regardless of how this started, a distinction has been created in your society that is every real in the heads of the individuals.
Well, the distinction is ultimately why I say that the racial ideology, racist ideology or the bigoted ideology is material at its root, is because what I think happened was these white working class, these blue collar workers who used to be, ardent, stalwart supporters of the Democrats and the left, got abandoned by the Democrats and the left. Then basically fled to the right because the right were the only ones that were advocating anything that was in their interest. And then the ideology, of course, of the right clashed with their former, radical socialist or social democratic ideology. But because the right was the only game in town that was in their material interest, the left having abandoned the material in terms of material interest, eventually that cognitive dissonance wins out in favor of the racist, bigoted ideology.
Fair enough.
And that's why.
However you want to get to it, I just want to make the case or make the point that it's there. However it happened.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I agree with you from the standpoint of more slaves were hung during times of economic stress. Like the economics does matter in regards to the way people perceive these things. So again, I agree with you on that point. But you also have to, based on your own argument, agree with me, at least I think you do, that a difference from African Americans versus whites, let's say in the 50s, as opposed to whatever that number is. Let's say it's between, the whites in a social status of 10, African Americans in 3. The moment that changes to, let's say, 10 to 8, from the standpoint of the person who's standing at 10, even though they haven't necessarily lost anything, from their perspective, they've lost something. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm making a point here that this goes beyond.
I think it's much more to do with the resentment they feel as to, well, why can't we both go up, the same amount? Why can't he go up 9 and I go up to 11? And
but that's still meaning that they're keeping their advantage, whether it's social or material.
I think that it's
right.
I think that it's primarily because they still feel like their lives are pretty exploited, and it's the focus isn't universalized on them, which is what the whole point of the left, the left project is supposed to be a universal project that transcends identity. But then you look at the way that the left actually operates in, or what passes for the left right now operates in real life. They focus on very tiny groups, and that just creates resentment amongst other people who go well, maybe my lives aren't as bad as theirs, but they're still bad, but I'm being ignored here.
This is what I would agree with you on. The politics that runs for the Democratic Party is a lot of identity stuff without economics. And in that identity stuff, it completely alienates other groups. I've seen people, I remember one of the women, she was a Sanders person of all things. And she tells a guy, she's like, "You're just a white man." I was like, well, what the fuck does that mean? And it's she's using
argument for why it's just
as a pejorative.
The best argument I can think of is that most of these people, most of the most fervent activists for these minority groups, these really oppressed groups of the working class or the poor, are themselves white. They are petty bourgeois, college educated, Ivy League liberals.
Yeah.
So but their material conditions, their standard of living is high enough that they don't feel that they're exploited or oppressed. So they don't really care. They don't feel threatened if they help some other identity group raise up.
Yes, that I agree with you with. It's one of the people told me, she was talking about America. She was like, yeah, she said they're comfortable. And her point was she's living off $3 a day. And you have first world problems in the country. And her point is, how can they not care about what is taking place in other parts of the world? And her diagnosis of that was they're just comfortable. I agree with you on that part. When you're not in a situation where you feel the bite of it, it matters to you less. You know what I mean? And you're a little bit more comfortable if you're in this kind of esteemed position where you can, you know, I'm in a great position in my life now. I can help others, but you don't necessarily feel the bite of what those other people are feeling. In this case, that I agree with. Dude, thank you for calling in, man.
Yeah, no.
And repeat your name one more time for me, because I always fuck it up every time I say it.
Just call me Ohm.
Ohm. Okay, fair enough, Ohm. Thanks, man. All right, guys. This has been an epic back and forth. I hope it... I'm talking about poor people of any so-called race. Yes, when I talk about poor, I talk about poor across the board. It is a hard like, I don't think you can make an argument of purely this kind of racial dynamic and get that argument over the finish line. I think it has to be across the board. I am sympathetic to the reparations argument. I have no idea how that argument gets through, because I don't think whites regard their history honestly. That's more so my appraisal of whites in the country. That said, an argument that raises everybody, yes, that is a much better chance of getting across the finish line, especially if you can make the argument that they're being exploited. So, yes, Trudy, Jamal is explaining how even the poorest whites see themselves as better. I wasn't arguing with JT Marshall Villager. But that wasn't that wasn't fully their fault. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Like the whites in this country were just as much damaged as the African Americans in this country were damaged. Slavery was a horrific fucking process. The person who was doing it, yes, worse for the person who was at the other end of it, but let's not pretend that the psychology of the individual that was involved in doing it wasn't also broken and contorted and disfigured. This idea that a person with a particular skin color is somehow better off has no basis in reality. And yet they go with this, this belief because it's self-affirming. It's like the Russiagate argument. Donald Trump assisted Russia. Why? Because we're Democrats and we need to come up with some reason why Hillary Clinton lost. To some degree, this is kind of the same thing that's soaked into the consciousness of a particular population. That also means, however, that African Americans to some degree were damaged by this. I don't think anybody made it out of that process intact. And I think it's a complicated history that we're kind of working our way through. That said, any change where you're going to talk about moving the ball forward means it's moving the ball forward across the board. I fully believe that. It's not enough about free education as reparations. Got to start somewhere. Brandon Adams. But see, the free education can't just be for blacks, because again, you don't have a society that regards this history honestly. They don't look at, maybe this is, my point of view of the country itself. So fair enough. Maybe this says more about me than it says about the country. Fair enough. I don't think whites regard their history honestly. This country started on a fucking genocide. And this genocide was followed up by mangling and contorting people into these things of objects to do their bidding as if they were machines or mules, while simultaneously reaping the benefits of that to a small section of the population. It wasn't that every white had slaves. It was only a very small segment of the population that had slaves. By the same token, creating the distinction in social classes between slave versus white did create a schism in your society where one side of society saw themselves as being better than the other side of the society. And not just better, better from the sake of God in a cosmic way. That has consequences. That's disfiguring to the person who's in the position of bondage, but it's also disfiguring to the person who's putting that person in bondage. It goes both ways. It goes both ways. It goes absolutely both ways. I don't have a strong belief that you can pull off and say, let's have education for white or for blacks as reparations. I think you'd have to have it across the board and open for everybody. Blacks will benefit from that, and so will poor whites. I think that's the way you go about it. You just say, look, we're going to cover education and we're going to make the top 1% pay for it. You guys have gotten magnificently wealthy off of the fruits of the labor of the people in the society, be it people buying your product or be it people working at your factories. And you've been able to hoard a huge ton of cash. Good for you. By the same token, you have a population that is doing that labor. And not only the population is doing that labor, if it wasn't for that labor being done, you would not have that wealth. It's time to give back in order to maintain the society itself. I will probably go further than most on this. I don't want us even having cash. I want us to get beyond this point of cash being the thing that's the glue in trying to get our society into this kind of Star Trek-esque society. But got to start somewhere. The reason why I say it wouldn't work for one section, because you would create resentment in another section. I mean, even look at affirmative action. Affirmative action was supposed to be reparations. It was supposed to be reparations. And look at the rage that was associated with affirmative action. And not just the rage at affirmative action. This thing in the consciousness of the person got there not because of their own skill, not because they were better, you know, all this other stuff, but because they were given a handout. That was the perspective of whites, with another section of the population completely missing the point that you completely enslaved the population and took off the fruits of their labor for 400 years. So you can't ignore race. It is less of a factor than class. Yes. 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 Yeah. I don't spend my show dwelling a lot on race because I think class is more important. Just because somebody looks like you and they're in office doesn't necessarily mean they're working in your interests. Obama gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. He has my skin color. That didn't stop him from giving 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. Class is a big fucking deal. And I would even say class is the primary deal, which is why I agree with Ohm on this, that a siege struggle for the working class that unites the working class under a guiding principle of increasing the standards of everyone, or at the very least having a base level of standard. I would argue elimination of poverty entirely. Yeah, I agree. I don't disagree with this argument at all. I don't disagree with the argument. I view anyone who's not a psychopath as my ally in this war with psychopaths. The 1% are psychopaths. If they are what their society made them. They're what their society made them. I mean, it's not like they came out of this in a bubble. The society has allowed them to gain massive amounts of wealth, and in allowing them to gain all of this massive amounts of wealth, they do not think like people. No, they don't think like people. They don't. I agree with them. Dude on the phone is reaching. Race before class is the foundation of this country. It began before the founding of the country. He has been socialized this way and finds it hard to actually admit it. No, I don't think he finds it hard to actually admit it. I think, look, socialists process the world in a particular way. Every socialist that I've ever talked to process the world in a particular way. I think the majority of it is right, but I think you lose something when you miss that dimension. Because regardless of how it might have started, the schism is there. I'm sorry, the schism is there. It's hard to look at the polls. The schism is there. Martian Villager, blacks and natives deserve reparations. What they deserve is a little different than what they're going to get in a society that doesn't even acknowledge the tragedy and the catastrophic behavior that took place. Like, for fuck's sake, look at how they talk about Lenin and the Russian Revolution. You had a fucking genocide! You had a genocide! And not just a genocide. I mean, you did turn a bunch of people into slaves. And then complain later, oh God, you guys keep bringing up this slavery stuff, or this Jim Crow stuff, or the fact that we were keeping you from jobs even going up to the 80s and the 90s. You should be over it by now. I mean, fuck, you've had 16, 20 years. Get over it. Correction, the 1% don't see progressive reform in taxes as the only way to save the earth, as a guillotine insurance against full-blown riots over income inequality are scum. Yellow Jackets unite. Yes, that is going to be a story that I'm going to do. It's fucking 11:40 here, so I'm not going to do that today. It's probably going to be what I do tomorrow. Most people don't regard their history honestly. That's true, Garden. This can be said about both blacks and whites. There are extreme examples of this phenomenon on both sides. That's fair. That's fair. Mark P, what happens to people who become too empowered? They destroy themselves and people around them. Example, coming into new wealth and power. It depends. Like, I think if I had $1 billion tomorrow, I'd be okay. Like, I don't think I would destroy myself. I would probably try to start a bunch of worker co-ops and try to put in a policy in the worker co-op that it would reproduce itself with a particular mission in helping some aspect of the society. And in its thing to kind of reproduce like a virus with another company doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. Each company that propagates itself, it's the constitution within the company itself says that it would, once again, when it gets to a particular point where it's sufficiently large, it would try to propagate itself again. I would try to create a virus. Now, I think of this from the standpoint of a software engineer, so this is the way I think about this. Create one that multiplies and tries to take over the system itself from within. But I think I'd be okay. I think I'd be okay. I don't think that's everybody. 11:40 p.m. That's lunchtime for you. Actually, that's dinner, Luca. That's dinner. I'm about to cook dinner. I always wonder what I would do if I wanted to lie or late. Every time I answer, I'd give it away. I don't think I'd give it away, but I would try to use it for productive ends. I mean, granted, I'm buying myself a house, so that's going to happen. And yes, my mom used to always say, I don't want to be rich, I just want to be comfortable. I agree with her on that. You lose touch over time and you become Bill Maher. Mark P. I don't know, man. I think at this point I might be a little fortified against that stuff. Jamarl will spend $999 million on hats. Oh, God. Like I said, I would literally start a company that is a worker co-op and put in the constitution of that company that it would need to help in some particular way, some measurable way. And then creating the constitution of that to also multiply when it gets to effect. That's what I would do with it. If you have $1 billion, I'm pretty sure you can find, you can pull that shit off. Hell, you might even be able to make two or three companies that do the same thing. The goal would be to try to populate itself out throughout the countryside. I want to change the dynamic that's in the country. Revolution would happen with or without DNC approval. The system would collapse on its own. Creative experiments. That's the hope. That is the hope. All right. Hats against climate change. Somebody said, what happened to all the haberdashers? I think Fred Edwards used to say, what happened to all the haberdashers? Where have all the haberdashers gone? I would buy a company that only produced fedoras. Yes, but still within the constitution of buying that company, they would have to do something positive, something that's measurable, that's positive in some particular way before propagating itself, even if it's doing fedoras. This video is so long that Jamarl was a left-wing radical when it started, and now he's a corporate. Yeah, I'm in this. This is patron appreciation, man. It's for my patrons. I appreciate you guys. I hope he's turned into a commie. I don't think I'm a commie. I don't think I'm anything. I'm more, honestly, I am more in tune to stuff like the Venus Project than anything else. Anarcho-socialism, I remember there's a guy on YouTube, Anarchist Socialist Rants. I love his channel. He has a really good channel. He makes these amazing arguments. He was making an argument about the Venus Project. And his argument was, look, what they're talking about is just anarcho-socialism. They're just calling it something different. I think Peter Joseph and Jack Fresco, if he was still alive, would disagree with that, but that was his argument. I don't necessarily know if that's fully true. His argument made sense, but I don't necessarily know if it's true. All right. I'll end this here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you guys can always support the content through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. And once again, all appreciation to my subscribers, all appreciation to the patrons, all appreciation to the people who support the content through PayPal or Patreon. You have allowed this show to keep ticking along, and even through hard times, where YouTube essentially gut the channel, and it's like, oh God, where's my next meal going to come from? I dramatically appreciate the fact that you guys allow me to do this show. This is the least I can do. Even if it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, it's the least I can do. So, not to mention, I didn't get the opportunity to do the show last week. So, I kind of want to make up for it. But, I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you. It's immensely appreciated. So, if, you know, people always send suggestions to me on the show, either through email, either through Facebook or Twitter. And of course, patrons can always, I think it's easy, you can reach me through Patreon, but it's probably easier just to send me an email if you get the opportunity, or if you need me, if you need to contact me. I am usually completely available to whoever emails me, so if you want to contact me that way. But look, my point is, just thank you. There's not much to say about it. Libertarian socialist ranks, yeah. So, I sell blood. I sell blood plasma to supporting. Oh God, I sell blood plasma to be your patron. Oh God, that's hilarious. Balthazar, donate through PayPal. Yeah, donating through PayPal, I end up getting more of the revenue. The benefit of Patreon is that I can see how much I'm getting each month. So if that makes sense, it's like, you know that you're getting a certain amount month after month after month, and when somebody leaves, you can see the fact that the person left, and you can make adjustments to whatever you need to. But by the same token, yeah, PayPal also allows for more revenue. So, all right, guys, I'm going to end this here. I know I keep saying that. Thank you for your support. So, all right, guys. Progressive Voice sells its credibility to finance Jamal. You can't too. Oh God. All right, this is going to immediately go up on Patreon. If you support the channel through PayPal, send me an email. I have a listing where. Oh fuck! I guess people wouldn't be able to see that from here. All right. I have a list of where people who support the PayPal, where they can also access this. But yeah, please hit like. This video is going to be hidden and uploaded on Patreon for my subscribers immediately after this. So thank all of you, and I appreciate you immensely. You have no idea. I hated what I did before. Like, as a software engineer, I became a software engineer because I was like, fuck man, I need to do something. And I have no idea what I can do. I've been playing chess my entire life, so people keep telling me that I'm to some degree bright, so maybe I can do software engineering. When I was interested in software engineering, I was fucking amazing at it. When I started to hate it and started to hate what I was doing, it was like digging a ditch. Like, it is a brutal thing to wake up every morning dreading the next 8 hours of your day, and for that to take place for year after year after year after year. This became a passion. It was natural as natural can be. I mean, I accrue around news in general, and family members, my wife, my poor wife, suffered immensely before I got the show, because, you know, I would talk about this stuff constantly. And at the point where I just started getting on YouTube talking about it, I was shocked as shit that people started showing up on the channel. So at this point, what, we're at 15,000 subscribers, 15,500, something like that. So I'll keep doing it if you keep showing up, and thank you very much. So natural to be that way too. At least for me it is. My interests are the same as all poor people. My interests are the same as all poor people also. There's a difference between poor, however, depending on the country that you're in, which is one of those things that are brutal, that you learn when you're traveling. So, all right, guys, you all have a good one. I'll see you in a few. My intention was to do multiple shows tonight, but that's not gonna happen. I am going to fix food, and I'm going to wake up early in the morning and just start an early day. Well, early, fuck, that doesn't work. I like starting shows early in the morning, like 7 o'clock in the morning on Eastern Standard. Eastern Standard at 7 in the morning is like, what, 1 o'clock here? So it's like I get the opportunity to kind of do my day. I can do my videos live, but nobody's going to be around for those live videos in the mornings. Either way. I have a full set of shows lined up for tomorrow. So I will see you guys then. Unless I can't sleep tonight and I end up just doing the news again. But again, thank you guys. You all have a good night. I see my mom is here, so shout out to my mom. And I see my wife is here, so shout out to my wife. I'll hit you up in a few to talk to you. We have stuff to discuss about the trip. And I don't have any answers for on this part. We're I'll end it after this. I am sitting in Czech Republic. I am in the middle of nowhere. So all of these places have been dramatically different. And this has been going on for what? We've been going for about 3 months now. This is the longest that I've been away from home. Beforehand, I was by myself when I was traveling. I think I was gone for like 2 months. That was during a time where my kidney was failing, or in the process of failing, or the process had failed. And I was just trying to make do until the failure had gotten complete. And I had made certain assumptions of the world that were wrong. And I ended up making the choice at the last minute to go back home. This time is different because my wife is with me, and we're able to do this not in a kind of a vacation way, but to work as we travel. That means there's a lot of moving parts. And in a lot of moving parts, that means she needs to be up to work every day. I need to be up to work pretty much every day, or at the very least keeping the same similar schedule as I did before. But let's be honest, I used to spend like 7 days, even when I said I would just do weeks. And even when I'm not doing the show, I'm thinking about things to have on the show. You can't get away from it. It's like a hamster wheel. And so it's a lot of moving parts. We've hit our head on an issue. There are 2 issues that have come up. This is trip stuff, and this is just for patrons. And I may cut the video so people can see it or not. But I guess this is inside baseball, as they call it. I made a hypothesis for this trip to work. My hypothesis was that we shouldn't be spending more than what we're spending at home as we travel. Meaning, we don't lose anything. Like, the money that we pay out for rent and everything else at home should be roughly the same, if not a little bit less than what we pay out while we're traveling. That's the only thing that makes the trip work. For the first few months, I think 3 or 4 months, I went living with my mom, her top floor thing. That was an odd experience, but my mom and I have an amazing relationship, so that ended up being a rewarding experience. And my wife gets along with my mom extraordinarily well. You may make an argument that maybe even a little bit better with my mom than her own. Don't tell her I said that, but that may be true. And so, no conflict. It worked well. You save up for those 4 months, and you use that to pay for your ticket to and put money in the bank for coming back. That way, you don't necessarily take the brunt force of airfare costs. And you jump to the first country. The first country is a country where the dollar is much stronger. You're talking about Kenya. And so, from the standpoint of what you're spending less. So you should, at that point, be able to save more money because you're not necessarily spending even more money than you would spend on your thing. That's the hypothesis, anyway. You get to Egypt, same hypothesis. I think $1 was 13 Egyptian pounds, or 17 Egyptian pounds. So, same hypothesis. Then you jump into, I think we were in Qatar for a day. We were in Dubai for a day. Yeah, Dubai for a day. Amsterdam for a day. Now, by the time you hit Europe, the numbers go out the window. The catch to this is, by the time you hit Europe, the money that you saved in the previous places gets put on top of the money that you're losing in Europe, because between the dollar versus the euro, the dollar versus the pound, the dollar is weaker, and so you are taking a hit anywhere that you're staying in Europe, with the exception of certain places. That was the hypothesis. That hypothesis has more or less in some cases prove correct, some cases not so much. They're cost overruns and they're fuck ups, and fuck ups are expensive when you're traveling because those fuck ups usually revolve around needing to take a flight, and that flight is, I think, it was like, we thought it was at 3 in the evening, but 3 in the evening would have been what, 1500, not 3, which means the flight was at 3 in the morning, and we fucking missed the flight, which means we had to pay out of pocket in order to pay for that, and that is not in the budget. It's like stuff like that, like little stuff where you don't predict. Like, so getting a treatment in Egypt, and the treatment in Egypt, you're thinking that the treatment costs $80, and you find out it's $250. You're like, what the fuck? And then you're stuck with that schedule because you factored in those. Meaning you don't have any wiggle room where you can say, okay, I'll just do 3 as opposed to 4. It fucks you over. That said, you try to save money in other ways as you go along the process of the trip. The issue sometimes in some places has been dealing with stuff like treatments, because those you have to pay out of pocket. If I was born anywhere in Europe, that would not be an issue. Every place that I've taken treatment, it would have been free, but not so much here. And so in this case, Czech Republic is close to a facility in Poland that was looked at as a safe haven, meaning the 3 weeks or so that spent in this little place that's in the middle of nowhere was done because of its proximity to the facility, not because it was of any travel value. We do want to go to Prague, that's 4 hours away. Warsaw is close, and my thought was, well, we can take day trips to those places. None of that happened because ultimately those are going to be separate trips. So this ended up being this kind of moment of respite, this breather before the next fuckery that's going to take place. Not to mention, Poland is a economically weaker country within the standpoint of the euro, so the treatments are dramatically less than places like Amsterdam, where the treatments are like $400, or Europe, or I think Amsterdam's like $450 for a treatment. That is fucking insane. Cairo was 80. No, I'm sorry, not Cairo. Cairo was 250. That's a ripoff. Kenya was 80. In London, I think it was like 400. Barcelona, I think it was 3 something. Like, it depends on where you are. There's certain countries that are more economically dominant than others. The goal in Poland was to find an economically weaker country of the euro, where we can have a moment of respite. The next place, Warsaw, is for the most part the same. That doesn't necessarily change, meaning for the most part you can get a full slate. You get that full slate, and you love that full slate, and you get every ounce of that full slate because you're paying for that full slate, and you know that there will come a point where you are not going to be able to get that full slate, and you might get like 1 within the course of the context of several days. So there's a conflict. Warsaw is next week. After Warsaw, my wife is coming back. So the next, it's like 3 weeks of solo travel. My wife comes back, and we meet, I think, in Germany, in Berlin. Berlin, oddly enough, is cheaper than Barcelona, which I wouldn't have expected. By the same token, it is expensive enough where you're only getting 1 in the context of that week, but it's not 7 days. It's broken up to less than that based on the way you're traveling and you're leaving from the other country. Yeah, the catch is, what happens after Berlin? I have no fucking clue. And I have no fucking clue because the original idea was to come back here, which is in the middle of nowhere, which is not necessarily something we want to do. All of these places have been dramatically different. And because each place is dramatically different, you respond to the environment that you're in. So and I threw myself into each one because I want to feel like a local. I want to have some kind of point of view of what it feels like to be people there. So in Barcelona, we're watching a football game, soccer, and they're like passionate about it in a way that is infectious and mind-blowing. I don't even sit and watch football games. I think that it's pointless endeavor. but fascinating to watch. Like to sit there and see these people like cheer and like their blood is on the field. In Lisbon, they have a cafe culture, and everybody smokes. And what I found myself doing was smoking also while drinking tea and eating a shitload of bread and butter. In Kenya, I don't think I had. What did I eat in Kenya? I don't know what I ate in Kenya. I know I lost weight in Kenya. I lost like 5 pounds. Cairo, the same thing. I didn't particularly like the food there. But by the time we got to Lisbon, that shit was out the window. The food in Lisbon was amazing. Not to mention the cafe culture. There was cafes everywhere. There was like 5 cafes in the area that we were in, full of heavy smokers. People with like 3-4 pack habits that just did this constantly. And so my wife was terrified that I was going to develop a smoking habit, to which I told her I'm not going to develop a smoking habit. I do this purely because of my environment. In Cairo, I smoked a ton of shisha. Every time I saw a shisha bar, we stopped because I wanted to smoke shisha and get tea. Fucking loved it. Like you sit there and do your show. Like you're sitting there writing up your show as you're inhaling a ton of shisha. And what's the other place? We were in Israel for I think 2 days. That was brutal though. Like that was the worst part of the trip. Like the room that we were in was like a phone booth. And not just like a phone booth. We were only there for like 2 days. And so it's like you have all of this luggage and you get there and you're there for like a day or two and then you're out. Now, that said, I was able to get prescriptions filled in Israel at great expense, but I was able to do it because I was running out. So shout out to the doctor who was trying to sell me pot on that one. He was a pot doctor. He was a pain doctor that dealt with pain through marijuana. And it was either mail order or he could prescribe it. I didn't want marijuana. I had 2 pills that I needed to get, tramadol and gabapentin. And I explained him reasons why, and I showed him the prescription himself. And he was nice enough to prescribe it after giving me a long conversation about, would you like to try marijuana? And hey, you can take this pamphlet and have it mailed to your home. This stuff has been fucking fascinating and phenomenal. Poland, I've been living off of butter and bacon, and it hasn't necessarily been doing me well. Now, what I mean by that is, because we're in the middle of nowhere, there is a big store, but there's a small corner store that my wife and I, when she was here, would go to. It's where we would make our groceries. There is a limited selection of stuff that you can get at the grocery store, and I end up finding myself continuously buying bacon. And continuously buying bacon, and I understand there's some vegans out here who say, oh God, you're a fucking asshole, and I would agree with you that I'm a fucking asshole and that because your arguments are right. But I don't know what else to eat. The sad part about it is, when I was like, fuck man, this bacon isn't doing me well, I keep putting on a huge amount of fluid because of the sodium that's in the bacon. I need to find something to eat other than bacon. And then it becomes, all right, what else are you gonna eat? And so you're looking around, you're like, all right, I don't know what that is. I have no idea what's in that package. I tasted that the other day, that was god awful. I don't know what's in those sausages. Like you're in this thing, so you end up getting the same things over and over again. Yeah, it's fascinating though. When we leave here in Warsaw, I'm looking forward to getting out of the middle of nowhere. The question becomes, what happens next? Berlin. I would like to stay in Berlin for 2 weeks, but I can't afford to stay in Berlin for 2 weeks, so that goes out the window. And if we do stay in Berlin for 2 weeks, there is going to be a Mad Max treatment schedule, which is going to require the following week to be somewhere where I can get full treatments to make up for the Mad Max treatment schedule prior in Berlin. Question becomes, where? Because wherever that is, it has to be inexpensive enough where I can get those. And we have no idea what that is. We have no idea what that is. My wife wants to go to Prague, and Prague, I gotta be honest, is somewhat of a pain in the ass. I think my thought was, being in Czech Republic was enough. It's close proximity to Prague enough where I can still get my treatment and she can still get her feeling for being in Czech Republic. I mean, everywhere that we've driven in Czech Republic looks like a snow globe. like it looks like it belongs in a snow globe. It's these iconic little towns. Like there are no highways per se. It's just one town connected to another town, connected to another town, connected to another town. And in being connected to these towns in this way, as you're going through them, it's like they look like they belong in snow globes. So I have no idea what next week is going to look like, or the following. I have no idea what the week after next is going to look like. So yeah, the trip is fascinating. All right, I'm going to end this. I know I keep saying that. How long should it? Oh, John Hill. Average wealth of blacks, depreciated assets 1,700. What is this? Average wealth of blacks, depreciated assets 1,700. I don't know what that means. What does that mean, John Hill? What does that mean? What does that mean? Why are you eating Sarah Huckabee Sanders with butter? Oh God, that's funny. That's funny. Why are you eating Sarah Huckabee Sanders with butter? That's funny. Jamal's going to spend the next month in Czech in a woodshed eating mice. Oh God. Is that what I need to find after the talk? Is a severe sever link or Discord? I'm not near as PC, but I'll write that down. All right, I'm going to end this here. We're talking about fuckery at this point. I don't think anybody cares about the shit that's going on from Stanford. I'm trying to figure this trip out. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. And if you're still here, again, thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.